Chapter 1397. The two armies searched the mountain and surrounded the area tightly. Yi Qinghan and his 50,000 men had nowhere to go and had become deathsworn. Emperor Shui Yan hated the death warriors to the core. He and Xiao Lin had the same goal. They wanted to capture the death warriors alive and torture them. Xiao Lin's goal was to find the real culprit. He wanted to know the name of the death warriors so that he could take revenge on their commander. On a small mountain peak, the 50,000 army crouched and aimed their crossbows at Xiao Lin's army. Once they were in range, they would kill them all. Killing one was enough, killing two was a profit. Yi Qinghan also turned berserk into a bow and aimed at Xiao Lin in the distance. His lips curled into an evil smile. Lu Zhantian looked at the direction Yi Qinghan was aiming at Xiao Lin and asked in a low voice, "If we kill him, it will affect our plan, right?" "We won't kill him. I'm counting on him to lead the army and help us defeat the ultimate martial realm's army." Yi Qinghan sneered. "I just want to anger him." Lu Zhantian nodded and said no more. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The two armies below shot arrows at the same time. They rained down on the mountain peak. Puchi humph. The arrow rain pierced through the army's body, but no one screamed and exposed their position. Yi Qinghan helped the group hide their auras. They only groaned and fell to the ground. Some people had better cover. Their stones were pierced, but they were not injured. After the arrow rain swept through, at least half of them died. Only 20,000 people were left. Everyone's eyes were filled with hatred. They stared at the army below, waiting for them to lower their guard and approached the mountain peak. The two armies quickly approached the mountain peak. Halfway up the mountain, less than 100 meters away, the shrubs could no longer hide their bodies. Whoosh. Yi Qinghan took the lead and shot through more than 10 ancient trees. He instantly rushed to Xiao Lin's body. Boom! Xiao Lin was caught off guard and was blasted to the foot of the mountain. If it were not for the fact that his armor was of a higher grade, the arrow would have pierced through his shoulder blade. This arrow signaled the start of the final battle. The divine power of the 20,000 soldiers poured out, and each arrow could penetrate a giant god's body. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Arrows rained down, instantly killing countless people. Yi Qinghan turned around and aimed at Emperor Shui Yan. This arrow contained 80% of his strength because he did not want to injure Emperor Shui Yan at all. He wanted to kill him directly. Boom! Whoosh! The arrow left a trail of flames behind it. Everything in its path was reduced to nothingness. Even the mountain rocks were burned to dust. Boom! Bang! The crossbow bolts pierced through the bodies of more than 10 Snow Realm soldiers and collided with the Snow Flame Emperor's divine sword. The aftershock of the collision killed several hundred giant gods. Humph. Puff. Emperor Shui Yan didn't expect there to be such a powerful being in this group of men of sacrifice. His explosive power was instantly destroyed, and his qi and blood were in turmoil. He spat out a mouthful of essence blood, and his body was sent flying hundreds of meters away, crashing into the foot of the mountain. Kill! Great Commander Tianwu will avenge us! Yi Qinghan shouted loudly. He led the army and charged into the enemy group, heading straight for the Snow Realm soldiers. The men of sacrifice dived down from above. With Yi Qinghan's charge, it was like a sharp knife stabbing into the enemy's heart. They were invincible. After a few charges, they actually reached the foot of the mountain. However, there were more than 10,000 soldiers at the foot of the mountain, and it was very difficult to charge out. Lu Zhantian turned into a meteor and led the 10,000 soldiers to charge at the weakest place. He hoped that he could take away a portion of the soldiers, but he was disappointed. Because there were too many captains in the Snow Realm army, and they were all die-hard experts of the imperial family. After a few charges, less than 2,000 of the 10,000 remained, and he himself was heavily injured. Boom! Shui Yan Emperor personally charged at Lu Zhantian with his sword. He could see that Lu Zhantian was the commander of the army, and he hoped to capture him alive. He killed more than 10 men of sacrifice with a single sword strike. When he reached Lu Zhantian's side, he broke the spear in Lu Zhantian's hand with lightning speed and pierced his chest with his sword. Yi Qinghan was shocked. He turned around and attacked Shui Yan Emperor, hoping to save Lu Zhantian. Boom! Shui Yan Emperor sent Lu Zhantian flying with a single sword strike and threw him into the Snow Realm army. He roared, "Capture him alive!" Soon after, the army took away the unconscious Lu Zhantian and quickly retreated from the battlefield. The rest of the army surrounded Yi Qinghan. Soon after, Xiaolinjun rushed to the top of the mountain and dived down. He surrounded Yi Qinghan and the 10,000 men of sacrifice from the rear. "Vice Commander, leave quickly. We will cover you." No one was willing to expose Yi Qinghan's identity. Otherwise, they would lose the lives of 500,000 soldiers for nothing. They all called him Vice Commander. Boom! A man of sacrifice self-detonated. The aftermath of the explosion flattened the nearby mountain rocks and ancient trees. Boom boom boom. Soon after, more than 10 men of sacrifice self-detonated. They killed hundreds of soldiers of the Snow Realm army, including Xiaolinjun. "Vice Commander. I am willing to do this. Please complete this mission." Boom! The only remaining Supreme God expert chose to self-detonate. His aura soared into the starry river, and flames soared into the sky. The range of the explosion reached hundreds of miles away. Everything within 100 miles was engulfed in flames. The energy was restless. Boom boom boom. One by one, the men of sacrifice self-detonated. Like firecrackers, they exploded in all directions. No one dared to get close to the battlefield. Yi Qinghan's heart ached. It was a pity to bring such a group of men of sacrifice here to complete the mission. However, for the sake of the millions of soldiers in Extreme Dao City, it was worth it to die. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan turned into a stream of light and disappeared in the flames of the self-detonation. They had suffered heavy losses in this battle. Even Lu Zhantian was lost. Less than half an incense stick's time after Yi Qinghan left, Lu Zhantian woke up. He looked up to the sky and roared, "I am willing to go with the wind. Avenge me. Take care of my wife." Boom! A firework exploded in the sky. Lu Zhantian had chosen to die. He wanted to glorify the world in the most glorious manner. Yi Qinghan fell from the distance. He turned around and looked at the firework. His eyes were absent-minded. The flames in his eyes had almost condensed into a solid substance. This was the first brother of the Kuang sect to die in battle since entering the 7 realms. Yi Qinghan took a deep breath. He thought of Lu Zhantian. For love, for Shaoqi, for his own army. He was a hero that few people could compare to. Who would have thought that he would die here today? "I will avenge you." Yi Qinghan roared. He turned around and fled towards the border. Shaolin was not willing to let Yi Qinghan leave. He led the army in the direction where Yi Qinghan left. Emperor Shui Yan hated Yi Qinghan to the bone. He immediately ordered the army to seal the border. Yi Qinghan sneered. He disappeared without a trace in a few flashes. After losing sight of Yi Qinghan, Emperor Shui Yan looked at the messy border of snow country and roared, "Gather all the troops at the border. Attack the ultimate martial realm." Shaolin wanted to take revenge. Naturally, he wanted to attack the ultimate martial realm. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. He quickly joined forces with Emperor Shui Yan. They broke through the border and rushed into the ultimate martial realm. Chapter 1398. Ultimate Martial World. The army surrounded Extreme Dao City. Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin left behind a large number of corpses and had no choice but to retreat to Extreme Dao City and defend the city with their will of death. The barrier shone for 1,000 li as countless armies attacked from the outside. Divine power poured down and the barrier was in danger of collapsing at any time. For experts with pseudo-world weapons stood around Extreme Dao City. They used their world power to reinforce the barrier, turning it into an unbreakable defense. The Kuang Zone was divided into 3 groups, supporting Gu Qingyu, Shi Gu, and Jiang Jingtian respectively. Xiao Yu, on the other hand, had the help of the 3 strongest fighters from Hell. As long as the 4 sides did not fall, the defense of the city would not fall. Hua. The 4 world powers formed a cycle and became the pillar of the world. It would never collapse. More than 1 million soldiers surged with divine power as they rushed towards the barrier to reinforce it. The people in Extreme Dao City did not know whether to help Ultimate Martial World or Extreme Dao City's army. They were the people of Ultimate Martial World, but now they were being protected by the people of Extreme Dao City. After the Snow Realm army occupied Extreme Dao City, they did not massacre them. In fact, they were even treated better than before. Most of the ordinary people did not care about who was in power, they only cared about whether their lives were guaranteed. Clearly, the lives of the people in Extreme Dao City were very stable. They did not need to worry about being bullied by the playboys or being exploited by the state government. They were vaguely looking forward to the victory of the Snow Realm army. Shua. A giant god walked out of his family. He used his will and divine power to pour his entire life's cultivation into the barrier just to reinforce it with a trace of divine power, hoping that the barrier would be even more stable. Boom! Another expert walked out of his family. One after another, hundreds of giant gods appeared on the originally empty street. War was related to everyone. No one could escape. Once the city was breached, the Ultimate Martial World's army would think that the people here had betrayed their world and would slaughter them all. Ing. Another expert appeared on the street. He had white hair and had the demeanor of a transcendent being. His supreme divine power surged and he was awe-inspiring. His eyes were focused and flickering with light. Hua. Supreme divine power poured into the barrier, causing the barrier to shine like a huge jewel that made people drool. Boom boom boom. Ing ing ing. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The Wuji army, the heavenly martial army, and the dragon god army unleashed a barrage of arrows, forcefully attacking the barrier. They hoped to break the barrier as soon as possible. As long as the barrier was broken, the 1 million soldiers inside would be like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Yi Qinghan appeared in the ultimate martial realm and looked at the barrier. He pulled out the divine bird and asked seriously, "Is there any way for me to enter the extreme martial city without alerting anyone or destroying the barrier? Do you really think I'm a divine bird? With so many armies attacking outside, even if I can pass through the barrier and bring you through, what about those attacks? How can you do it without making a sound?" The divine bird rolled its eyes and mocked. "From underground. I will be responsible for going to the underground of Extreme Dao City, and you will be responsible for sending me into the city." Yi Qinghan immediately said. The divine bird hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, "I'll do my best. Who knows if there are any special arrangements under the city?" Yi Qinghan mobilized the earth elements and quickly disappeared. The earth elements were like air, helping Yi Qinghan. Xiu xiu xiu. Yi Qinghan shuttled through the underground like a pangolin. The earth and rocks didn't have the slightest effect on him, and he quickly approached the bottom of Extreme Dao City. The bottom of the city was filled with steel, and it was hundreds of meters thick. It was very difficult to break through from underground, otherwise, the army would have already dug through the city walls. Yi Qinghan released his divine sense and looked for some special gaps. Every city had them, but they were very narrow and not suitable for the army to escape or attack. These gaps were used by some experts to escape. Not long later, Yi Qinghan found the escape tunnel and rushed to less than 1 meter below Extreme Dao City with the divine bird. However, the barrier formed a huge sphere, and even the underground was blocked. This was the fluctuation of the world's power. If Yi Qinghan forced his way in, the defense outside would become extremely weak in an instant, and the army outside would be able to break through easily. He still had to rely on the divine bird, which could ignore the barrier. The divine bird shuttled through the barrier, stretched out its little claw, and said in a low voice, "Fuse with my mind. I don't know if I can bring you in, but let's give it a try." Yi Qinghan held the divine bird's claw, and his soul fused with the divine bird, as if they had become one. Shwa! Yi Qinghan actually entered the city without any resistance. Ha ha ha! This divine bird is indeed invincible. The divine bird said arrogantly. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and in a flash, he arrived on top of the city wall. Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin's faces were solemn, and they didn't notice that Yi Qinghan had already arrived behind them. The plan succeeded. Just hold on a little longer, and there will be reinforcements coming. Yi Qinghan said in a low voice. Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin were shocked, and they turned to look at Yi Qinghan with a face full of surprise. However, when they saw the murderous intent on Yi Qinghan's face, they knew that there was a problem with the plan. Brothers Hua, what happened? Ji Gu asked in astonishment. Yi Qinghan clenched his fists, and the corners of his eyes twitched. He stared at the army in front of him and coldly said, "The suicide squad was completely wiped out, and my brother Lu Zhantian is also dead. Today, I will make them pay the price." Zhu Wuxin clearly knew about Lu Zhantian, and when he heard that he had fallen, he was somewhat surprised, and his mood was somewhat low. "Mister, please restrain your grief," Zhu Wuxin said in a low voice. The cold wind blew his black hair, and Yi Qinghan's heart was in turmoil. He didn't know how to explain this to Lu Zhantian's wife, Mu Xiaoqi. At this time, countless armies rushed out from the border. There were at least 3 million Snow World Army soldiers, and 5 million ordinary recruits. Shaolin was filled with anger, and without even asking, he led the charge towards the Tianwu army. Boom! The Tianwu army, Dragon army, and Wuji army were surrounded. Arrows rained down, and under the close-range attacks, even the defensive barrier couldn't be opened in time. The tens of millions of soldiers were in chaos, and they were all fighting. Gotcha! Yi Qinghan clenched his fists, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. His eyes emitted a cold light. Supreme Tianwu, Long Ziyue, and the others were stupefied. They didn't understand why the Snow World army suddenly appeared. Even Shaolinjun appeared, and their numbers instantly surpassed theirs. The encirclement was turned into an encirclement, and the advantage became a disadvantage. Turn around. Activate the heaven-destroying bow. Defend. Defend. Long Ziyue personally led the Dragon army to attack the enemy, hoping to tear an opening. However, he was indeed the commander of the charge. The Dragon army's aura was like a rainbow, and they forcefully tore apart the ordinary army. The army circled around and crushed all the experts in the surroundings. Boom! The army destroyed heaven and earth, and dust flew everywhere. There were countless casualties, and every breath would take away thousands of lives. When the supreme gods were surrounded by thousands of soldiers, they were pale and powerless. Although the supreme gods could instantly destroy hundreds of giant gods, they couldn't escape the attacks of others. As long as one supreme god was ambushed, he would die on the spot. The Wuji army and Tianwu army gave up on attacking Extreme Dao City, and began to turn around and attack. They wanted to leave the battlefield, and there wasn't much use in fighting to the death. Chapter 1399. The wind whistled, and blood rained down. Giant gods were constantly being smashed into pieces and scattered all over the sky. The sky was dyed red, and the earth was dyed red. Battle robes fluttered in the wind. Prepare for battle. Yi Qinghan shouted. Boom! The army below the city was fighting, but Yi Qinghan didn't have any intention of participating. He didn't want to lose the army that he had spent so much effort to gather. The death squad from before had moved him. Some people shouldn't be used as cannon fodder, just like these people who believed in him. They were death soldiers, and they shouldn't die in vain. Yi Qinghan looked at the army coldly. No matter how many people died, he did not feel any heartache. As long as he could protect the million elites in the city, it was fine. Supreme martial artist Tianwu stopped Shaolin. Seeing how Shaolin was glaring at him with killing intent, as if he wanted to turn him into dust, Supreme martial artist Tianwu couldn't understand. He roared, "Shaolin, do you want to start a war between the two worlds? What does today's matter have to do with you? You still have the face to ask me? It's fine if you sent your army to the true martial domain, but you actually slaughtered my clan and humiliated my Shao family's descendants. Today, you will die without a doubt." Shaolin was furious. He pulled out his sword and charged towards the Sky Martial Saint. "When did I send people to the true martial domain? Even if you want to find an excuse, you need to have evidence. You are provoking the ultimate martial domain." The Sky Martial Saint roared. 500,000 death soldiers. From the ultimate martial domain's martial domain river to the true martial domain, you killed countless of my Shaolin city's people, humiliated women, plundered resources, and then went to the Snow Country's divine domain and killed countless Snow World soldiers. Are you still my true martial domain's people or the Snow World soldiers? In the end, they still fantasized that the Sky Martial Army would take revenge for them. Today, I will destroy the Sky Martial Army. None of you will be able to leave alive. Today, the true martial domain and the ultimate martial domain are at war. It is not your turn to declare war. Shaolin waved his hand and ordered the army to charge towards the Sky Martial Saint. Kill a Sky Martial artist and you will be rewarded with 10,000 genes of resources. You will be promoted to governor. Hua! The great army swarmed forward. A large portion of Shaolinjun's army was his direct descendant, and they charged toward the heavenly martial arts supremacy with the hatred of their family. When thousands or even tens of thousands of people poured out their divine power at the same time, the combined attack formed completely surpassed that of a supreme divine power. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the place where Prime Sky Martial Saint stood was razed to the ground. Prime Sky Martial Saint escaped, but the tens of guards beside him died miserably on the spot. The Martial Emperor was furious. He retreated to the army and quickly gathered tens of thousands of soldiers to clash with Shaolinjun. Shaolin and Supreme Martial Artist Tianwu soared into the sky. Divine radiance collided with their surroundings. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Boom. Waves of chi surged, and no one dared to get involved. Only the two of them fought with all their might, and occasionally, blood would splash through the air. Standing on the city wall of Extreme Dao City, Yi Qinghan looked on coldly. He was emotionless as he watched tens of millions of people fighting, just like an ice-cold demon king. The army in the extreme martial city was incomparably excited. Their blood was boiling, and they couldn't wait to rush in and kill the extreme martial world's army. Yi Qinghan had no intention of getting involved. It would be best if the leaders of the three armies in front of him died here, especially the Snow Flame Emperor. If he died, the Snow Nation's divine world would once again return to his control. If he didn't die, he would continue to pester him and take the pseudo-world artifact. The extreme martial world's army led by Sun Yang was the first to break through the defenses of the Snow Nation's army. Together with the Dragon God army, they finally opened a path to the heavens. However, the Heaven Martial World's army was entangled by Shaolinjun. They were not allowed to leave. Today, they had to annihilate the Heaven Martial World's army to vent their hatred. Prime Sky Martial World was enraged. He forced Shaolin back with a sword and roared, "My entire army is here. When did I send 500,000 death warriors to attack the true martial world Shaolinqing? Shaolin, you have to take responsibility for your actions. I can't be bothered to talk to you. Wait until I take your head and offer it to Shaolinqing, then I'll tell you everything." Shaolin was furious. How could he listen to his explanation? He just wanted to get rid of the Heaven Martial World's army as soon as possible to get his revenge. Kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. Shaolin once more ordered his army to charge at the Heaven Martial World's army. The Snow Flame Emperor also led his army to charge at the Heaven Martial World. The Heaven Martial Army's death warriors had caused incalculable losses to the Snow Nation's divine world, especially in terms of reputation. The Grand Snow Flame Emperor had personally led an army of 10 million to guard the border, but a mere army of 500,000 had broken through their defenses. That was an absolute humiliation. This enmity had to be avenged. Only by destroying the Heaven Martial World's army could they establish their might. So the ordinary army was only responsible for blocking the Dragon God army and the Extreme Martial World's army, allowing the Snow Flame Emperor and Shaolin to deal with the Heaven Martial World's army. The pressure on the Heaven Martial World's army suddenly increased. 1 million people were fighting against the elites of 2 divine dynasties. The difference in numbers was more than 3 times. In just a short while, they had lost nearly 100,000 soldiers. The Dragon God army and the Extreme Martial World's army once more returned to the battlefield under Long Ziyue and Sun Yang's command. They wanted to bring back the Heaven Martial World's army so that they could retreat to the Heaven Connecting Gorge. The army was having a hard time. The front line was stretched too far, and the enemy quickly broke through. Shaolinqing's army was immediately pincered. His army of 900,000 was instantly reduced to only 800,000. New grudges and old grudges caused their armies to descend into a frenzied state. The meat grinder of war was brought out to its fullest. War was cruel, and anyone could die. Just the shockwaves from the battle would kill a few experts. The Snow Flame Emperor glanced at the Extreme Dao City's army. Seeing that they weren't doing anything, he was furious. "What are you waiting for? Why aren't you attacking?" Yi Qinghan coldly snorted and waved his hand, indicating for his army to calm down. Ji Gu hesitated for a moment. This was the best time to wipe out the Heaven Martial World's army. He didn't understand why Yi Qinghan wasn't attacking, so he asked, "When are we attacking?" "There's no rush. It's fine if we win this battle, but if we lose everything, we won't be in control anymore," Yi Qinghan calmly said. Then, Ji Gu frowned. He still didn't understand when Yi Qinghan was going to attack. Wait for the Snow Flame Emperor to die or be heavily injured. Yi Qinghan coldly said. Ji Ji's mouth twitched. He didn't expect Yi Qinghan to be so ruthless. Although he didn't give the Snow Flame Emperor any face, he didn't want him to be heavily injured or killed. The 3 armies of the Extreme Martial World exploded and scattered the army, leaving behind a large number of corpses and broken limbs. They finally broke through the encirclement of the 2 armies, but they suffered heavy losses. The 3 commanders were all injured, and their battle robes were tattered. The Snow Flame Emperor was gasping for breath. He had lost a lot of his life force, and his face was pale. Not only was he unable to take revenge, he had lost half of his elite army. Shaolin had also suffered heavy losses. He had brought out 1 million elites from the true martial world, but he had lost more than 200,000 in 2 battles. At this moment, his face was green with anger. Right at this moment, Yi Qinghan waved his hand, and a giant bao appeared. It was about the same size as the Extreme Martial World's Heaven Exterminating Giant Bao. His body transformed into a giant body, and his veins bulged. His divine power poured out and formed a long sharp arrow, aiming at the Sky Martial World's Supreme Martial World. Hiss hiss hiss. The space was cut apart by the bowstring, and black holes appeared continuously. It was a shocking sight. Whoosh! The sharp arrow pierced through the void, dragging a huge flame behind it. It shuttled through the air above Shaolinjun and killed its way to the center of the Heaven Martial World's army, heading straight for the Supreme Martial World. Supreme Martial World. Chapter 1400. Boom! The huge arrow pierced through the void and exploded beside Prime Tianwu. Divine power surged and instantly destroyed hundreds of experts. Bang! Ah! The sharp arrow was like a hot knife through butter. It directly sent Prime Tianwu flying. A special power of the world pierced through Prime Tianwu's defense and shattered his armor. It almost destroyed his life force. His body was like a kite with a broken string as it smashed through the army and fell 1,000 meters away. The Tianwu army was affected and at least hundreds of people died. Prime Tianwu fainted on the spot. Yi Qinghan put away the huge bow and stopped attacking. He coldly looked at the army below the city and finally fixed his gaze on Emperor Shuiyan. Emperor Shuiyan also gasped. He did not expect the huge bow to be so powerful. It could injure Prime Tianwu from a distance. His eyes were filled with greed. However, he did not know that this was Yi Qinghan's life weapon. It also had the Great Desolation Divine Bead as its weapon spirit. It could be used with the power of the world in his body and his comprehension of the power of the world. Even if he had the Berserk Gravity Bow, he would not be able to play any tricks. Shaolin had forgotten about his revenge. He stared at Yi Qinghan with suspicion. However, he did not know what he was thinking. Even he did not know. Long Ziyue and Sun Yang quickly brought Prime Tianwu back to the sky connecting gorge and sent out a signal for help. Below Extreme Dao City, close to 10 million people were staring at each other. No one spoke. The ordinary army was stunned by Yi Qinghan's arrow. Shaolin and Emperor Shuiyan's eyes were filled with greed. They wanted to steal such a treasure. It was comparable to a pseudo-world weapon. Yi Qinghan looked down at Emperor Shuiyan. Emperor Shuiyan's old face was filled with anger. It was as if Yi Qinghan owed him something. Sua Feng! How dare you go against my will? Do you still have any respect for the royal family? Emperor Shuiyan asked angrily. Yi Qinghan couldn't help laughing out of anger. He asked back, what a great identity you have. You actually want to take the pseudo-world weapon in the middle of the war between the two realms. If you don't succeed, you will seal the border and cooperate with the enemy to kill our soldiers who are charging at the front lines. You have caused our Snow Realm army to suffer more than 1 million casualties for no reason. You still have the face to say that you are a member of the imperial family. On behalf of all the soldiers, I ask you, what position do you place us in? As a member of the imperial family, do you treat us soldiers who have risked our lives for the Snow Empire as trash, and abandon us just like that? Do you represent the royal family or yourself? Shuiyan Emperor was speechless after being questioned. He simply couldn't imagine that a commander of the Snow World Army would dare to verbally attack a great elder of the imperial family in public. Emperor Shuiyan's face turned red as he roared, "You're slandering me. Attacking and blaspheming the royal family is simply lawless. I'm slandering you. Mr. Ji Gu is Mr. Ling Yan's disciple, there should be people who believe his words." Yi Qinghan said coldly. At this moment, Ji Gu walked forward and stared at Emperor Shuiyan. He said firmly, "Emperor Shuiyan, this time you caused our Snow World army to suffer more than 1 million casualties for no reason. Cooperating with the ultimate martial realm army to seal the border, you want to bury these millions of soldiers here. I will personally ask for an explanation from the Imperial Family Elder Council. I will sue you for treason. Even if the Realm Lord is alarmed, I will make sure that the dead soldiers have an explanation." Emperor Shuiyan's body trembled. His spine felt some pain as cold sweat dripped down. However, Emperor Shuiyan was an old fox. How could he be intimidated by two juniors? He said coldly, Sua Feng, this emperor asked you for the pseudo-world weapon for the glory of the Snow Empire and the God Realm. However, you refused without hesitation. You clearly don't put the divine nation in your eyes. This emperor had no choice but to ask you to hand over the pseudo-world weapon. Naturally, I won't let the army die in battle. Ji Gu doesn't understand the situation, but you do. If you dare to blaspheme the imperial family again, this emperor will kill you today. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha, Yi Qinghan laughed wildly. Everyone was shocked as they didn't know what he was laughing about. Who do you think you are? Why are you asking me for the pseudo-world weapon? My pseudo-world weapon was exchanged with my life. Do you think you can take it just because you want it? Isn't that too funny? Or have you gone senile? You want to use the pseudo-world weapon to bring glory to the Snow Empire and the God Realm, then what am I doing? The Heavenly Martial Army has already broken through the border cities of the Snow Empire and we are the ones who led the army to counterattack. Are you trying to ruin the reputation of the Snow Empire and the God Realm? At the crucial moment, you want to take away the pseudo-world weapon and even seal the border. You don't allow reinforcements and resources can't be replenished. I have every reason to suspect that you are secretly in cahoots with the ultimate martial realm. When this matter reaches the Imperial Family Elder Assembly, the truth will be revealed. Yi Qinghan's aura suddenly changed as he said coldly. The majority of the Snow Empire army's grassroots were on Yi Qinghan's side. This was because Yi Qinghan was speaking for the dead soldiers and did not even hesitate to offend the Imperial Family Elder. However, Emperor Shui Yan was truly betraying the Snow Empire army. The millions of ordinary soldiers were naturally on Yi Qinghan and Ji Ji's side. They all coldly looked at Emperor Shui Yan with hatred in their eyes. Emperor Shui Yan had no way to back down. He shouted, "Traitor, you are insulting and slandering the Imperial Family Elder. You want to rebel. Take them down. If you dare to resist, kill without mercy. If you dare to stop, you will be sentenced to death as traitors." Yi Qinghan curled his lips and raised a trace of disdain as he coldly looked at the army. However, no one dared to move. Even if Emperor Shui Yan had a few loyal followers, when they wanted to move, they immediately panicked when they saw that the army was not moving. Seeing this, Emperor Shui Yan became even angrier. He angrily looked at the Snow Empire army and roared, "Could it be that you also want to rebel?" The army still did not move. At this moment, even Xiao Lin was a bit shocked. He could not imagine the prestige Yi Qinghan had in the Snow Empire army. Normally, when the Imperial Family Elder came out of seclusion, if they wanted to catch someone, they only needed to stretch out their hand. Even a commander like Zhu Wuxin would not be able to escape. However, no one dared to catch Yi Qinghan. Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin coldly looked at the army below. Seeing everyone's performance, they let out a sigh of relief. Emperor Shui Yan colluded with the ultimate martial world and cut off their supplies without permission. He sealed the border and caused millions of Snow Empire army to die in the ultimate martial world. I, as the Commander-in-Chief of the Snow Empire Army and the Snow Empire Imperial Court Assistant Ministers Wa Feng, hereby issue an arrest warrant. Yi Qinghan coldly said, "Men, open the city gate and capture Emperor Shui Yan. If he dares to resist, execute him on the spot. If anyone dares to stop, kill them on the spot as traitors." Hiss. The army sucked in a breath of cold air. The Snow Empire Army's commander had never arrested a Grand Elder of the Imperial family. This was the first time in history. However, the army was not angry. Instead, they were somewhat excited as they looked at Yi Qinghan, Ji Gu and the others who were on top of the extreme Dao city. Creak. The city gate opened. Huang Zong and the others led their army and rushed out, heading straight for Emperor Shui Yan. They were really going to capture him, not just to scare him. Emperor Shui Yan's expression greatly changed as he roared, "Are you all rebelling? Destroy this army for me. Chapter 1401. Emperor Shuai-Yan roared, but the army remained indifferent, especially the new recruits, who took the initiative to make way for Quan Zong and the others. Emperor Shuai-Yan kept retreating because the people from the insane sect were holding pseudo-world weapons. Da-da-da. Boom. Boom. The army marched in unison and glared at Emperor Shuai-Yan. They didn't care if he was an elder of the imperial family or not. This time, they had almost been killed by him and they had lost 1 million of their brothers. Neither Ji Gu nor Heartless objected to Yi Qinghan's treasonous actions. On the contrary, they were very supportive. In order to win over the hearts of the people, this was the best decision they could make. Emperor Shuai-Yan, if you have a clear conscience, then don't resist. Otherwise, I will take your head as a sacrifice to the nearly 2 million soldiers who died today. Yi Qinghan said coldly. Emperor Shuai-Yan took a deep breath and looked at the pseudo-world weapons in the hands of Jiang Jingtian, Gu Qingyu, Xiao Yu, and Shi Gu. Acting recklessly. Yi Qinghan snorted coldly in his heart. Now, Yi Qinghan still wanted to covet the pseudo-world weapon. He could not help but feel murderous again. Go ahead and be greedy. It would be great if the entire imperial family were as greedy as you. I will lead the Snow World army and rebel. I will use the name of cleaning the monarch and killing the traitors to completely control the Snow Empire and the Divine Realm. Yi Qinghan muttered to himself. His ambition was ignited and he became even more greedy. He wanted to destroy the royal family of Snow Country and lure out the realm lord of Snow Country's divine world so that he could determine the extent of Shui Wudi's injuries. Snow Country's divine world's heavenly snow god, extreme martial world's hierarch Wu Ji, true martial world's night demon deity king, transcendent world's righteous heaven divine monarch, endless world's Wu Tian sovereign, six beast worlds demon venerables, divine martial worlds divine martial worlds seven supreme worlds heavenly snow god, extreme martial worlds hierarch Wu Ji. These 7 supreme world lords were not willing to come out. Until now. They must be severely injured, otherwise, they would have come out to enjoy themselves. Yi Qinghan understood the 7 of them. They were all in seclusion now. As long as the God dynasty wasn't destroyed, they wouldn't appear. There was only one possibility, their injuries were worsening, and they might not even have the ability to protect themselves. Even with a realm weapon, they might not be able to win against a peak pseudo-sector lord. If Yi Qinghan couldn't win against a peak pseudo-sector lord, he naturally couldn't win against Yi Qinghan who had the Great Wastelands tablet. Of course, the prerequisite was that Yi Qinghan could reach the pseudo-sector lord level. If he wanted a draw, he had to reach the pseudo-sector lord level. Emperor Shuai-Yan's eyes flickered. He wanted to resist, but when he saw the 4 pseudo-world weapons showing their sharpness and killing intent, he gave up and surrendered. Ji Gu, you should be the one to capture him. I don't trust the left commander's residence. Emperor Shuai-Yan stared at Ji Gu and said. Ji Gu looked at the expressionless Yi Qinghan and did not object. He waved his hand and ordered a group of death soldiers in the city, capture Emperor Shuai-Yan and guard him strictly. Other than this marshal, no one is allowed to approach him. Shua. The army rushed out of the extreme Dao city. A senior commander restrained Emperor Shuai-Yan and led a group of 10,000 men to imprison him. Mr. Ji Gu, I'll let you escort Emperor Shuai-Yan back to the holy city. I'll stay in the extreme Dao city, Yi Qinghan said indifferently. He obviously couldn't return to the holy city now. Otherwise, the group of royal elders would definitely seize the pseudo-world weapon. Ji Gu could see that Yi Qinghan had some misgivings, so he didn't object. At least he had Ling Yan behind him. Other than Shui Wudi, no one else in the royal family would dare to do anything to him. Alright, I'll leave this place to you. When the matter with Emperor Shuai-Yan is over, I'll immediately return. Don't worry, from now on, no one will dare to cut off our supplies. Ji Gu said firmly. Yi Qinghan nodded and didn't say anything. Very quickly, Ji Gu led a group of people to escort Emperor Shui Yan back to the Snow Country's divine world, leaving the army standing outside the city, not knowing what to do. Yi Qinghan looked at the army and said, "All troops, set up camp here and rest for a few days. Prepare to counterattack the extreme martial world and take revenge." "Yes, sir." The army was neat and uniform, and their momentum was like a rainbow. Xiao Lin looked at the heaven-connecting gorge in front of him and then at the extreme Dao city behind him. The anger in his eyes was self-evident. The Sky Martial Sovereign hadn't been killed yet, the Sky Martial Army hadn't been destroyed, and the humiliation of the country hadn't been avenged. How could they retreat? Yi Qinghan looked at the change in Xiao Lin's expression and snorted inwardly. "Brother Lu died because of you. I'll bury you and your army here." However, this amount of people isn't enough to mess up the situation. "You must be Senior Xiao Lin. I didn't expect you to participate. Aren't you afraid of dragging the true martial world into the realm war?" Yi Qinghan asked indifferently. Xiao Lin's mouth twitched and he roared hoarsely, "The Sky Martial Army and I cannot live under the same sky. The undying Sky Martial Army will never rest." "Ha ha ha ha," Yi Qinghan laughed and disdainfully said, "Senior Xiao Lin, it's not that I'm looking down on you, but how can you destroy the Sky Martial Army with just a few 100,000 people? You don't even have enough resources. Once you enter the ultimate martial world, your army will probably be wiped out." Xiao Lin's expression was ugly, but he couldn't refute that. "Of course I'd be happy to have more reinforcements. However, the army you're bringing is uncontrollable. It will mess up my plans." Yi Qinghan looked down at Xiao Lin and said coldly, "Senior, if you want revenge, I can help you." However, with this amount of people, it was clear that Yi Qinghan wanted to force Xiao Lin to bring more troops from the true martial world and start an all-out war between the three realms. If the ultimate martial world wanted to win, they would have to rope in people from other realms. In the end, it would affect the entire 7 realms. "I can help you open up the passage between the true martial world and the ultimate martial world so that the true martial world's army can enter. Of course, I also believe that Senior has the ability to do so," Yi Qinghan said indifferently. The border between the true martial world and the ultimate martial world was endless. It wasn't just the martial extreme river that was a dead end. As long as they crossed the extreme Dao mountain range, the other side would be connected. Yi Qinghan stared at the struggling Xiao Lin. He wasn't in a hurry and waited for him to make a decision. Zhu Wuxin quickly mobilized the army to set up camp. He personally led a team to set up defenses in the heaven-connecting gorge. Another team blocked the east side of the extreme Dao city to prevent the ultimate martial world's army from attacking. There were too few virtuous paragons that were suitable to lead troops. Other than Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin, Lu Zhantian had died in battle. There were no other peerless experts that could lead troops. Furthermore, Lu Outyan was overseeing the primal chaos realm. Without a virtuous paragon to lead troops, they could only raise their own. After a while, Xiao Lin finally nodded and said, "Mr. Shui, if possible, please help me open the passage to the true martial world. I want to mobilize the army and start an all-out war. You and I will work together to destroy the 10 great legions of the ultimate martial world." "Good. Senior is truly courageous. Today, I will personally lead people to open the passage and let the true martial world's army enter." Yi Qinghan smiled. There was a faint evil aura in his smile that made people's hair stand on end. After the army was arranged properly, Yi Qinghan personally led 2 million troops and Xiao Lin's army to the west. They crossed the extreme Dao mountain range and headed straight for the westernmost plains. Chapter 1402. The ultimate martial world was split into 2 regions, east and west, with the extreme Dao mountain range as the boundary. The mountains and rivers were beautiful, and the extreme martial river stopped at the Tier Danger Ground. It extended for thousands of miles and flowed towards the ocean. Heading towards the northwest, it was the vast and bustling border. Both the true martial world and the ultimate martial world had been peaceful for so many years, and no one cared that the war would affect this place. The 2 million strong army split into two, heading towards Steel Forest City from the north and south. Steel Forest City was dignified, much more so than the extreme Dao City. It possessed top-notch fighting strength, and its army was close to 1 million strong. However, when they saw the 2,800,000 strong army attacking them from the front and back, they immediately fired a distress arrow. Hua! Yi Qinghan transformed into a giant god, and with the giant bow in his hand, the ground was cracked. The giant bow was stretched, and the space was cut apart. His aura rushed towards the heavens. Fight! Fight! The army roared, and their aura was like a rainbow. Steel Forest City's barrier was fully activated, but the army on the city wall was shocked and terrified. They felt that the barrier wouldn't be able to block the attack of the giant bow. Boom! 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 Jiang Jingtian held the world-piercing spear in his hand, and Shi Gu weighed the stone slab in his hand, revealing an arrogant smile. Veins popped out all over their body, and they were ready to support Yi Qinghan's attack. Hua.Xiu. A 10-meter-long arrow as thick as an adult's arm pierced through the clouds and waves, tearing apart the shackles. It roared as it transformed into a giant flaming dragon, and the world's power rushed towards Steel Forest City. Boom! Jiang Jingtian soared into the sky, man and spear as one, and followed the arrow towards Steel Forest City. Boundless heaven and earth, invincible brick. Look at my heaven-covering brick. The stone slab in Shi Ji's hand suddenly changed endlessly, and it was infinitely enlarged as it fiercely smashed towards the barrier. The three god powers all carried the world's power, and the attack range was all focused on a single point, enough to destroy the heaven and earth. Boom! The arrow was the first to hit the barrier, and it caused the heaven and earth to shake. The soldiers on the city wall felt their heads explode, and as if they had been hit, blood flowed out of their 7 orifices, and they fell back stiffly. Although their bodies didn't die, their souls had been shaken to death. Boom! CSISISI. The giant arrow spun, the barrier was distorted, as if it was about to be pierced through. Whoosh! The world-piercing spear was about to pierce through the barrier. It came from the side and struck the spot where the giant arrow was attacking. In an instant, the barrier collapsed. The two attacks blasted into the city, causing a mushroom cloud to rise. Boom! Shi Gu held the huge brick and fell from the sky. It was as if the sky had collapsed as he smashed into the city wall. Boom! The city wall was smashed by the huge stone bricks, and the city gate was crushed. What followed was a flurry of arrows, covering the sky and covering the earth as they rained down on Steel Forest City. A single arrow might not be able to kill a giant god, but dozens of arrows were enough to destroy a giant god. As for a higher deity, a single arrow could pierce through their soul and body. In an instant, they suffered heavy losses. Steel Forest City was unable to put up any effective resistance. The commander of the army was stunned by Yi Qinghan, Jiang Jingtian, and Shi Ji's attacks. He felt powerless and despaired. He couldn't even muster up the will to fight. A battle of this level was simply a one-sided slaughter. Those who surrender will be spared. Yi Qinghan bellowed. He was like a war god as he stepped onto the collapsed city wall. He held the giant bow in his hand and looked down on everyone. The army rushed into the city. Together with the two vanguards, they were even more destructive than a sharp knife. What followed was Xiaolinjun at the back. Because the city didn't have a defensive barrier, Xiaolinjun's anger was vented. He took the lead and rushed up the city wall. He swept across and forcefully broke open the city gate. He led the army in. He didn't accept captives at all. He only wanted to destroy and plunder. Steel Forest City was flooded with blood. A large number of commoners fled towards the southern city gate. The southern city gate accepted captives, but Xiaolinjun didn't. The southern city gate was filled with people. They were wailing and begging to surrender. Yi Qinghan stood on the city wall and looked towards the north. Xiaolinjun was like a wolf and tiger, charging into the streets on the east and west. It was a complete massacre. Yi Qinghan's mouth twitched. He had some killing intent, but he didn't stop it. Go, stop Xiaolinjun in the northern region of the city. Yi Qinghan waved his hand and signaled. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers advanced in batches towards the center of the city. They wanted to seize all the important resources in their hands. The army was as fast as lightning. They were seizing resources. If they were a step slower, they would lose everything. In order to make use of Shaolin, they obviously couldn't use force against him. Jiang Jingtian and Shirgu led hundreds of thousands of soldiers to surround the city lord's mansion and the treasury, stopping Xiaolinjun in the northern region of the city. Shaolin was slightly angry, but he suppressed it in the end. Who asked him to have fewer people? He naturally didn't have an advantage in seizing resources. Yi Qinghan took in a large number of captives. He didn't forbid the commoners, but he had to control the army. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to waste time and set down restrictions. The Snow Border Army occupied the east, west, and south of the city. They didn't seize the resources of the commoners or the clans. However, the resources of the official forces were all seized. The army was very conscious and didn't humiliate the city lord's women. They had a strict system and a strong sense of honor. Even Shaolin felt ashamed of his inferiority. Establish a puppet army and let them control Steel Forest City. Yi Qinghan swept his gaze over the terrified commoners. He knew that it was better to use people to rule people. Only then would Steel Forest City not fall into chaos. The people of Steel Forest City naturally trusted their own people more. A special puppet army was quickly established. The governor was still the governor of Steel Forest City's guards, but he was restricted. After settling down Steel Forest City, Yi Qinghan gathered the army and appeared in the northern region of the city. He met up with Xiaolinjun and charged towards the border region. The border army had slightly more soldiers. They had already discovered that there was a problem at the rear and immediately set up defensive fortifications. However, when faced with Yi Qinghan's attack with a pseudo-world artifact, their fortifications were like paper and couldn't withstand a single blow. Xiaolinjun charged at the very front and fought with the Steel Forest Army. They suffered heavy casualties and their blood dyed the border river red. The true martial domain's guards on the other side of the border river immediately discovered the sudden change in the ultimate martial domain. They began to attack from the other side. They attacked from the front and back. Although the border army was strong, they couldn't withstand the attacks. In the end, they were completely slaughtered by Shaolin's army. Their corpses were all thrown into the border river. As they flowed down, some terrifying carnivorous fishes swam and devoured the corpses. Yi Qinghan didn't participate. Instead, he led the army back into Steel Forest City. After Shaolin dealt with the border army, he mobilized 5 million soldiers from the true martial domain. The royal family promised that as long as Shaolin broke through the true martial domain's core, he would be able to obtain a large amount of territory. The 5 million soldiers gathered outside Steel Forest City. It was a black mass, and the natives of Steel Forest were extremely terrified. Yi Qinghan came to the northern city wall and looked down at Shaolin. He said indifferently, "Senior, let the army stand guard outside the city. We can discuss how to attack the ultimate martial domain." Chapter 1403. In Steel Forest City, Shaolin was very bold. He directly entered alone to discuss the plan with Yi Qinghan. Yi Qinghan spread out a map. Using a red brush, he drew 2 lines along the extreme Dao mountain range and marked them with arrows. They converged from the 2 sides of the mountain range to the end, spanning approximately 12 prefectures and stretching endlessly. The extreme Dao mountain range starts from the Steel Forest Prefecture, crosses the Spring Divine Prefecture, Sihai Prefecture, and ends at the Clearwater Prefecture. After crossing the Clearwater Prefecture, it will be the hinterland of the ultimate martial world. You guys will start from the Spring Divine Prefecture, and we will start from the Heaven Connecting Gorge. The 2 armies will attack from the 2 sides of the extreme Dao mountain range, and finally converge at the hinterland of the ultimate martial world. I will lead the army to force the Heaven Martial Legion, Dragon God Legion, and Ultimate Martial Legion into the hinterland. We will cripple their 10 great legions and annihilate the Heaven Martial Legion. Finally, we will have them negotiate for peace. No problem. But you have to give Steel Forest City to us. Otherwise, the true martial world will waste a lot of time on resupplying, and it will affect our attack, said Xiao Lin firmly. However, Yi Qinghan shook his head and said firmly, I'm sorry, but there's no reason for me to give up the city I conquered. I can allow you to borrow the Dao Steel Forest City, but I won't allow Shaolinjun to mess around in the city. Obviously, Yi Qinghan didn't plan on letting the true martial world's army return alive. The city here would be an important place for him to seal off the borders of the true martial world. I can use other cities to exchange with you, or other conditions. Mr. Zhua, please state your price. Xiao Lin looked straight at Yi Qinghan. He definitely couldn't let Yi Qinghan control such an important place. This was equivalent to cutting off the throat of the true martial world's army. If he cut off this place, the fate of his army would no longer be in his control. Yi Qinghan slowly sat down and looked at Xiao Lin. Looking at his resolute gaze, he knew that he had to give up Steel Forest City. Otherwise, Xiao Lin wouldn't dare to mobilize his entire army, which would affect his final plan. Senior Xiao Lin, why don't you state your bottom line? I'll see if you have the sincerity. If you do, it's not impossible for me to give Steel Forest City to you, Yi Qinghan said calmly. Xiao Lin pondered for a long time, then said in a deep voice, Steel Forest City controls the fate of the true martial realm's army. Even though I want to take revenge, I won't let the army take such a risk. There's even the danger of the entire army being annihilated. This old man cannot give you the control of Steel Forest City. As long as you are willing to give up the control of Steel Forest City, this old man is willing to give you a world stone and a phosphorus crystal. These are the treasures that the fake world lord loves the most. Realm Stone. Yi Qinghan's eyebrows twitched, and a glint flashed across his eyes. He immediately asked, what level is the Realm Stone? Let me have a look. Whoosh! Xiao Lin took out a stone that was filled with world energy. It was fluctuating with divine radiance and a heavy pressure that could suppress one's soul. It looked like it was only the size of a fist, but the internal mass was extremely heavy. It weighed more than 5 kilograms. This was a divine stone used by world lords, and its level was very high. The world energy inside was equivalent to 30% of a world lord's peak strength. Once it exploded, it would be enough to destroy an entire primal chaos realm. However, to be able to fully control it, one had to be a peak pseudo-world lord expert. For someone like Xiao Lin, it was impossible for him to absorb the energy inside, and he couldn't use it either. Just a little bit of the energy inside was enough to make him explode. Therefore, such a divine treasure was useless to him. As for the phosphorus crystal, it was a divine material that aided the combustion of divine flames. It could melt pseudo-world artifact materials, and once the divine flames level was high enough, it could even refine world artifact materials. It was the favorite item of blacksmiths. This item was extremely rare, and it was naturally nurtured by the heavens. It was very hard to find. Deal. Yi Qinghan said without hesitation. Mr. Zhua is someone with great insight. You are still young, and pseudo-world lords are just at your fingertips. This old man will consider it as giving you a favor. Otherwise, one steel forest city wouldn't be able to exchange for such a supreme treasure. Xiao Lin smiled and expressed his goodwill. Yi Qinghan smiled, and the corner of his lips curled up. Lu Zhantian had died in Xiao Linjun's hands, so Xiao Lin had to die. No matter what treasure he gave, it wouldn't change the outcome. However, Yi Qinghan still accepted the world stone. Soon after, Yi Qinghan announced the withdrawal of the army, bringing away all the pseudo-soldiers in Steel Forest City. All the civilians were terrified. They knelt in front of the city gate and begged Yi Qinghan to bring them away as well. Once Xiao Linjun took over this city, the experts would definitely be slaughtered, and the weak would become slaves. The fate of the women would be even more miserable. If Mr. is benevolent, you can bring away all the living beings in this city. This old man isn't interested in them. Xiao Lin brought a portion of the army into Steel Forest City. Soon after, he gave the phosphorus crystal to Yi Qinghan. This transaction was officially completed, and he was in a good mood. Thus, he gave Yi Qinghan a favor. Yi Qinghan looked at the people kneeling in front of the city gate. After thinking for a moment, he said, "You can follow the army through the extreme Dao mountain range, but you have to keep up with the troops. Once you reach the extreme Dao state, you can build your own city." Many thanks, Mr. Mr. is benevolent. We definitely won't be enemies with you. The civilians in Steel Forest City were overjoyed. Their families were even more excited as they kowtowed and expressed their gratitude. Yi Qinghan then led the army and led everyone towards the extreme Dao mountain range. The pseudo-soldiers might have taken care of the civilians because they were from the same hometown. However, since the civilians couldn't keep up with the army, they could only guard the rear. Yi Qinghan didn't stop them. He first led the army through the extreme Dao mountain range. After a month, they returned to extreme Dao city. The civilians of Steel Forest City were led by the pseudo-soldiers. After a long and arduous journey, they finally reached the vicinity of extreme Dao city after half a year. Yi Qinghan had already given the order to allow the civilians of Steel Forest City to build a city on the ruins of the extreme Dao sect. With the help of the pseudo-soldiers, they were able to build a new home. This batch of civilians had a good relationship with Yi Qinghan. Many young experts took the initiative to request to join the army. They hoped to make contributions and have a good position so that they could help their loved ones in Steel Forest City. Otherwise, they would feel uneasy. The pseudo-soldiers were already dead set on Yi Qinghan, and the extreme Dao state was completely under his control. At this time, Yi Qinghan had already led the army to break through the Through Heaven Gorge and occupied the central state. He used war to support war, established the pseudo-army, and treated the civilians well. This resonated with the civilians of the extreme martial realm. A large number of young talents were depressed and started to join the army. They wanted to counterattack their own mother realms, hoping to build a fair and just world. With the help of the 4 pseudo-world artifacts, the supply of supplies from the rear was very fast. It wasn't strenuous to fight at all. However, there were many traders in the extreme martial realm. Although these traders were scum to the extreme martial realm, their living conditions had been greatly improved. It was every man for himself. If their mother realms didn't treat them well, it didn't matter if they betrayed them. The army rampaged and drove straight in, forcing the 3 legions to retreat again and again. At this time, the paper spears appeared and started to attack even more fiercely. Chapter 1404. With the addition of Ji Gu, the 3 legions were defeated one after another. They had no choice but to send reinforcements from other realms. However, 4 out of the 8 legions of the Snow World Army were sent over, all under the control of Yi Qinghan. His position as commander was unbreakable. Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin were the deputy commanders. The 2 of them did not have any objections. The only ones who could control them were probably the Snow God, Yi Qinghan or Ling Yan. Yi Qinghan led an army of 12 million. The main force was the 4 trump card legions, and the normal recruits were split into 8 legions. They swept through the world and forcefully seized 14 state cities. They completely controlled them. The eastern regions of the hinterland were all lost. The ultimate martial world was a bit anxious. Dragon Mountain State, Great Dragon Mountain City. It was a hilly region with a rugged mountain range. It was easy to defend and hard to attack. The Heaven Martial Legion, Dragon God Legion and Ultimate Martial Legion cooperated with the local defenders to defend. Once this place was breached, it would be a flat plain behind them. It would be even harder to resist. Great Dragon Mountain City was located in the only large plain in the hilly region. It had a circumference of 1,000 miles. The front 2 wings were mountain peaks and the valleys were mountain paths. It was the most difficult to attack. Yi Qinghan led the army and appeared outside the valley. The military tents had already been set up and the exit of the mountain range was used as a barrier to set up military fortifications. Yi Qinghan had gotten an armchair from somewhere. He sat in the middle of the valley and looked at the villages and the army. He was not in a hurry to attack. This mountainous region was the most dangerous. If they were not careful, they would be killed. If the army was defeated, it would affect the whole army and lead to the defeat of the entire army. If we break this place, the ultimate martial world will be defeated. Mister, do you have a good plan? Zhigu ordered people to bring over a table and 2 chairs. He sat opposite Zhu Wuxin on the left and right of Yi Qinghan and asked indifferently. Mr. Zhigu and Brother Zhu, what do you think? Yi Qinghan asked indifferently. This place is full of mountains. They are used to mountain battles. It is very difficult to fight. If we attack, we will suffer heavy losses. Even if we break through Great Dragon Mountain City, the later battles will be very difficult. We might even lose our strength and completely collapse. Zhigu said as he looked at the mountain range in front of them. Zhu Wuxin tasted the divine fruit on the table and fell into deep thought. It was as if he only knew how to eat. The divine bird was also tempted by the food. It ran to the table and swept it clean, leaving only the leftovers. Yi Qinghan flicked his finger lightly, sending the divine bird flying. Bang! The divine bird was like a small meatball as it fell heavily to the ground. It rolled several times and was stunned by the fall. It stood up and glared at Yi Qinghan. I just won't eat some of your divine fruits. Is there a need for this? The divine bird roared. Don't eat if you don't put in any effort, Yi Qinghan said with a raised eyebrow. Who said I didn't do anything? This divine bird is an intelligent almighty being. Is there even a need for me to deal with such trash? Are you all idiots? The divine bird roared. Poof! Zhigu spat out a mouthful of tea, spraying all over Zhu Wuxian's face. Zhu Wuxin looked at Zhigu and divine bird with an innocent and angry face. Who are you calling an idiot? Zhigu felt that he was in the wrong. He avoided Zhu Wuxian's questioning gaze and chose to ignore it. He directly questioned the divine bird. Are you not an idiot? This is such a small place. Is it worth setting up a military camp for research? What a waste of resources. This divine bird only ate a little and you still attacked me. I'm so angry. The divine bird was so angry that it paced back and forth. It wanted to curse, but it couldn't think of any other way to deal with Yi Qinghan. It could only tremble all over. Yi Qinghan looked at the divine bird with interest. He leaned back in his chair and supported his head with his fist. He asked curiously, Divine bird, since you are an intelligent almighty being, how do you think we should attack in order to minimize our losses and take down the Long Mountain City in the shortest time possible? Why should I tell you? What does it have to do with me? I'm so angry. The divine bird roared. Yi Qinghan's mouth twitched. If he gave this brat face, it would ascend to the heavens. Are you angry with me? Yi Qinghan's voice suddenly became cold. He stared at the divine bird with a sinister gaze, causing people to feel a chill. The divine bird's breath stagnated and its head shrank back. It immediately said firmly, "How could I be? This divine bird is loyal and devoted. I've always been loyal to my master. I've never considered my own feelings in front of my master. How could I be angry with you?" Oh. Yi Qinghan's tone was as calm as water. It was as if he hadn't heard the divine bird express its loyalty. In fact, he didn't believe the words that came out of its broken mouth. The divine bird was a little discouraged. It felt that its flattery had hit the nail on the head. It immediately sat on the ground powerlessly, as if it had been wronged. "Then tell me, how should we attack?" Yi Qinghan asked indifferently. "Water attack, drown them. Fire attack, burn them to death. Use the method of destroying humans to destroy the Great Dragon Mountain region. Let them all die in a sea of fire." The divine bird roared, as if it had transferred all its hatred to the Dragon Mountain region. Yi Qinghan narrowed his eyes at the divine bird. He touched the chair with his fingertips and said hoarsely, "It seems like you want to burn me to death with fire more. How could that be?" The divine bird immediately retorted. Everyone thought that it would express its loyalty, but it quickly said, "You have a fire origin body. How could I burn you with fire?" Yi Qinghan's mouth twitched. He said coldly, "If I didn't have a fire origin body, you'd be prepared to burn me with fire?" "That's..." The divine bird sneered, but when it saw Yi Qinghan's cold face, it immediately continued, "That's absolutely impossible. My loyalty and reverence for my master is like a torrential river, continuous and unending. I don't even have enough time to revere you. How could I be disrespectful to you? I've been following you since I was young. Don't you understand me?" Yi Qinghan was too lazy to discuss with the divine bird. He immediately shut his mouth and looked at the surrounding mountains. There were trees, weeds, and thorns everywhere. If it was winter, once they were lit, it would be impossible to extinguish them. That would truly be a genocide plan. It was too vicious, and many innocent people would die. However, Zhu Wuxin and Ji Gu were somewhat tempted. The plan was feasible. Moreover, this was another world. They would not care about the lives of the people here. In the imperial city of the ultimate martial realm, the emperor's face was full of anger and worry. The 3 legions were retreating in defeat. He had sent 2 more legions as reinforcements, but they could only defend. They could not completely drive out the armies of the Snow Empire, the realm of gods, and the true martial realm, let alone counterattack. Are you all trash? Little Zuofeng and Ji Gu, Zhu Wuxin, are juniors. The commanders of the 10 legions are actually helpless. Shaolin only has a few million troops, but they are still unable to stop their advance. What's the use of raising you? The main hall was filled with a deathly atmosphere. No one dared to volunteer to fight because Zuofeng's army had 5 great pseudo-world weapons. Even if another legion was sent as reinforcements, it would still be impossible to change the situation. 10 million god stones for the heads of Zuofeng, Ji Gu, and Zhu Wuxin. Kill any one of the 3 and you will be bestowed the title of king and a province's territory. Kill the commander of the vanguard of the left martial residence and you will be able to marry any one of the 7 princesses. A bounty spread out from the imperial city. It was like a sudden clap of thunder in the vast ultimate martial realm, setting off huge waves. Chapter 1405. After Wu Jimu announced the bounty, the entire ultimate martial world was shaken. Many experts rushed towards the Dragon Mountain continent. Young geniuses, overlords of an area, all of them were invincible. When they attacked, they could destroy the heavens and earth, twisting time and space. They arrived at the great Dragon Mountain city and looked down on the Snow World army outside the valley. On the other side of the extreme Dao mountain range, Shaolin's army was attacked by 3 armies and suffered heavy losses. However, for revenge, Shaolin didn't hesitate to pay any price. He killed hundreds of thousands of Ultimate Martial World Army and stood firm. 40% of the Ultimate Martial World's army was mobilized into the Dragon Mountain continent. There were at least dozens of Supreme God Overlords in the Great Dragon Mountain City and 8 of the top 10 experts of the young generation. A young expert in a green robe with a divine sword in his hand appeared to be as light as the wind and clouds, as slow as flowing water. However, he was actually as fast as lightning, crossing 1,000 meters in a single step. Hua! There was an uproar near the Great Dragon Mountain City as everyone stared at the youth in front of them excitedly. It's Spirit King Wu Ji. The third-ranked existence of the young generation. I didn't expect him to be here. Ha ha ha, let's see how arrogant Zhuo Feng and the experts of Zhuo Martial Mansion are. The sword in his hand seems to be a pseudo-world artifact. This time, we can counterattack. The army was restless as they started to discuss. Spirit King Wu Ji walked casually and was filled with confidence. He only stopped when he reached the center of the valley. His sharp eyes stared at Yi Qinghan, Zhu Wu Xian and Ji Guo who were sitting on the armchair. His eyes were filled with killing intent and disdain. Yi Qinghan looked over indifferently. The youth's body was filled with explosive power, especially the sword in his hand, which attracted his attention. Sword of No Return. Jian Bugui's disciple, the goddess in everyone's heart back then. Yi Qinghan instantly recognized this person. Jian Bugui, a peak expert in his previous life, a pseudo-sector lord pinnacle existence. She was also a female and had once fought against the resentful dragon. Zhuo Feng, I heard that your battle strength is unparalleled. Do you have the courage to fight with me? If you win, you can do whatever you want with me. If you lose, kneel down and surrender. Spirit King Wu Ji's deep voice reverberated throughout the valley, rousing the morale of the army. Yi Qinghan coldly snorted. Such an existence was indeed strong, but it was only on the same level as Jiang Jingtian and Gu Qingyu. It was still a bit lacking against him. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan slowly got up, his battle robes flapping loudly. With a wave of his hand, a 7-foot-long saber appeared in his hand. It was heavy, dignified, and possessed a powerful aura. Don't worry, I won't kill you. As long as your sword of no return doesn't return, your ancestor's sword will come to me for it. Yi Qinghan took a step forward and crossed 1,000 meters. He raised his saber and waved it, creating a shockwave that spanned 1,000 meters. The power of the world tore through space and time as the saber edge collided with the sword of no return. Boom! The aftershock rushed into the valley and surged on the cliffs on both sides. The trees were turned into fine powder, and dust was raised to cover the eyes. Thud! Thud! Whoosh! Revered Spirit King Wu Ji took dozens of steps back. The rocks under his feet were crushed, and his fingers were trembling. Even the sword of no return almost slipped out of his hand. Ding! Whing! The berserk sword and the sword of no return were trembling crazily. The frequency was so fast that even the souls of those with weaker cultivations would be shattered. Yi Qinghan didn't move at all. His feet were rooted to the ground as the corner of his mouth rose. It was full of provocation. Boom! Immediately after, Yi Qinghan soared into the sky and slashed down with his saber. Shoo! Shoo! The sword of no return in revered Spirit King Wu Ji's hand turned into thousands of sword shadows. The sword intent soared into the sky and crushed the enemy's resistance. Shwa! The sword shadows brought along the power of destruction and the power of the world as they attacked Yi Qinghan's heart. However, Yi Qinghan didn't even dodge. The saber edge turned into the back of the saber, and the back of the saber slammed into revered Spirit King Wu Ji's head. Boom! Ding! The sword stabbed into Yi Qinghan's chest, but the Feather Spirit King Wu Ji's clothes blocked the attack. However, revered Spirit King Wu Ji didn't have a supreme defense. His head buzzed from the impact, and his soul screamed. He seemed to have lost control as his body crashed into the valley on the left. Boom! Revered Spirit King Wu Ji's body smashed into the side of the mountain. His body was stuck in the rock, and he was bleeding from his 7 orifices. He was out of his wits, and the sword in his hand fell to the ground. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Pseudo-world artifact defensive divine robe. No. I can't accept my loss. PFFF. Revered Spirit King Wu Ji's face was filled with unwillingness. He thought that his sword would be faster than Yi Qinghan's and kill Yi Qinghan the moment his attack reached him. However, he was disappointed. If he hadn't taken such a risk, he wouldn't have lost so quickly. Yi Qinghan waved his hand and took the sword of no return. He didn't kill revered Spirit King Wu Ji. He still said calmly, I will keep my word. I won't kill you. Let Jian Bugue take the sword himself. Yi Qinghan returned to the camp with his hands clenched. His proud back view shocked the ultimate martial realm's army. Even revered Sky and the other 3 commanders were stunned. They took a deep breath and forgot to give the order to attack. You despicable man! Give me back my sword! Revered Spirit King Wu Ji struggled unwillingly. He jumped out of the mountain. If Yi Qinghan hadn't shown mercy, his soul would have been destroyed. Now, he was still charging at Yi Qinghan. Boom! Jiang Jingtian, who was behind Yi Qinghan, crushed the mountain rocks with his foot. He was like lightning as he kicked at revered Spirit King Wu Ji's chest. Bang! Boom! Revered Spirit King Wu Ji's body was like a kite with a broken string. He was sent flying dozens of meters away. Shwa! Jiang Jingtian coldly raised his long spear and pointed it at revered Spirit King Wu Ji. His murderous intent surged as he coldly said, if you dare take another step forward, I will kill you. Revered Spirit King Wu Ji's hair stood on end. He couldn't breathe properly. He was intimidated by Jiang Jingtian's murderous intent. Yi Qinghan sat back in his armchair and said calmly, forget it. Children don't know any better. After all, you are the descendant of an old friend. Jiang Jingtian coldly glanced at revered Spirit King Wu Ji and retreated out of the valley with his spear. Revered Spirit King Wu Ji retreated unwillingly. Before he left, he fiercely said, you are only relying on the pseudo-world treasure armor. Otherwise, that sword would have killed you. Do you think you are worthy of being an old friend of the ancestor? Yi Qinghan smiled but didn't say anything. He let him leave. The 100 Overlord class experts in Great Dragon Mountain City all sucked in a breath of cold air. Some of them clearly showed signs of fear and wanting to retreat. After all, they didn't have pseudo-world treasures or pseudo-world treasure armor. Fighting with such people was simply asking for a beating. If they couldn't break through their opponent's defense, they would just be passively taking a beating. However, some of them were still full of fighting spirit. Their eyes were sinister and filled with greed. One of the sinister youths was like this. He looked at Yi Qinghan from afar. His fingers were clenched and his eyes were like a falcon's. They were filled with predatory intent. Yi Qinghan felt uncomfortable being stared at by this gaze. He took the opportunity to look over and couldn't help but be stunned. Another descendant of an old friend. I really didn't expect this. The descendant of a pseudo-world lord at the peak. Revered Spirit Kingly, you have killed so many people of my great wilderness. This descendant will be the interest. Yi Qinghan muttered to himself. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Chapter 1406. Paragon Li, a peak pseudo-realm lord. Back then, he had just stepped into that realm when he followed Paragon Wu Ji into the Great Wasteland domain. Li Hua, that malicious youth was his great-grandson's descendant. The three-pronged pincer in his hand was a pseudo-realm artifact personally forged by Paragon Wuxia. Relying on this pseudo-realm artifact, Li Hua fought his way into the top 5. However, he had never fought against the top 4. Thus, his confidence had always been bursting. He felt that he could kill 2 or 3 of them and enter the second place. Yi Qinghan beckoned Shi Gu over and whispered, "Lure that Li Hua out and pretend to be defeated. I want to kill him." Shi Gu immediately smiled evilly at the distant Li Hua. He took large strides towards the valley. The valley was filled with shocking cracks. "Cowards of the ultimate martial realm, which one of you dares to accept my challenge? I will allow you to fight 3 to 5 against 1. I won't even frown." Shi Gu stood in the middle of the valley with a huge stone brick and said arrogantly. The group of overlords of the ultimate martial realm were instantly enraged. They stared coldly at Shi Gu and wished they could slap him into the mountain. The 4 armies of the ultimate martial realm were restless. If it wasn't for the commander suppressing them, they would have charged into the valley and smashed Shi Gu to death. With so many armies, even a pseudo-realm artifact wouldn't be able to save him. Paragon Sky Martial Realm had a malevolent expression. However, due to his status, he didn't accept the challenge. Instead, he looked at the sudden appearance of the overlords and young geniuses. He hoped to cripple or even kill Shi Gu and spread the prestige of the ultimate martial realm. There weren't many who possessed a pseudo-realm artifact. Other than the inheritors of the peak existences who had experienced the Great Wasteland War, they were unstoppable with the weapons of their ancestors. However, there weren't many of them. Only 4 or 5 of them appeared here. Other than Li Hua and Spirit King Wu Ji, there were only 2 or 3 of them hidden in the Great Dragon Mountain Range. Li Hua's goal was to kill Yi Qinghan and the left marshal's residence's governor. After being provoked by Shi Gu, he immediately walked out of the city gate tower. With a stride forward, his fiery red robe fluttered in the wind, as if he was paving a path with flames. "Li Hua King. It's Lord Li Hua. Ha, another one. Let's see how arrogant they are." The army of the ultimate martial realm immediately became excited. Yi Qinghan narrowed his eyes as he looked at Li Hua. The flames in his eyes were blazing as his killing intent rose. Shi Gu sneered as he looked at the 3-pronged pincer in Li Hua's hand. He said arrogantly, "Where did this trash come from? Tell me your name. I don't kill nameless pawns." "Ignorant junior, you dare to behave atrociously in my ultimate martial realm? You really have guts." Li Hua held the 3-pronged pincer in disdain and said coldly, "I'll kill you first, then I'll kill that coward behind you. Cowardly dog, did you eat my guts? Then return it." Boom! Shi Gu cursed loudly. The stone brick enlarged and smashed towards Li Hua. Whoosh! Li Hua waved his 3-pronged pincers, rolling up an unparalleled flame, burning half the sky red. The scorching temperature even burned the surrounding rocks into powder. The stone brick blocked the high temperature. It rolled up for half a day, sending the heat waves crashing towards the distant fire. Boom! The 3-pronged pincers in Li Hua's hand suddenly enlarged and clamped down on the stone brick. The power of the world tore it apart. Li Hua's powerful body exploded with a sky-piercing power. He twisted his legs and suddenly exploded to one side, trying to lift the stone brick away. Boundless heaven and earth, stone brick connects heaven and earth. Freeze! Whine! Whine! The stone brick was as immovable as a mountain, resisting the 3-pronged pincers with all its might. The vibration frequency was extremely fast. Shi Gu was also secretly competing. He was not willing to lose to Li Hua like this. He pressed 2 fingers on his temple and mobilized his soul to the strongest level, starting a battle with Li Hua. Boom! Li Hua twisted his waist and fiercely flung the stone brick into the side of the valley. Boom! Rocks flew everywhere. The stone powder was comparable to a sharp weapon, flying all over the sky. The stone brick rumbled, shattering the mountain. However, Li Hua was as fast as lightning. He waved his three-pronged pincers and attacked Shi Ji's body. Shi Ge was shocked. He flew backwards and turned to escape. If his body was caught by the pseudo-world artifact, not to mention him, even Yi Qinghan's head would be crushed. Boom! A huge hole suddenly appeared where Shi Ge was standing. The crack rushed directly to where Yi Qinghan was sitting. Humph! Yi Qinghan twisted the tip of his foot. A surge of world power rushed from the tip of his foot to the crack. The two forces collided in an instant. Yi Qinghan's explosive power shattered the aftershock and rushed back to the valley, crashing into Li Hua. Li Hua originally wanted to chase after Shi Ge, but he had no choice but to defend himself against this wave of energy. His three-pronged pincers smashed against the incoming wave of energy, shattering Yi Qinghan's attack. Li Hua stared coldly at Yi Qinghan, who was sitting motionlessly in his original spot. Bullying with numbers. It seems that the Snow Nation and Divine World are nothing more than this. The left marshal's residence is also of this level. Li Hua looked at Yi Qinghan with disdain and said, "Sua Feng, if you have the guts, come out and fight. If I don't kill you today, I swear I won't rest." Yi Qinghan waved his hand and forcibly pulled the stone brick back. Shi Ge took it and slowly stood up, smiling evilly. Shua! Yi Qinghan appeared in the valley and walked toward Li Hua along the crack. "I was afraid that you didn't have the guts to run away after losing," Yi Qinghan said calmly. "Do you think I am your subordinate? Do you think I will run away when I see that I am no match for you?" Li Hua mocked with disdain. "If that is the case, I will play with you. If you can dodge 3 moves, I will spare your life. If you can't, you will die here." Yi Qinghan clenched his iron fist, and heavy madness appeared in his hand. Whine! Heavy madness shook and slashed at Li Hua with a force that could split the sky. Li Hua laughed evilly. He raised his three-pronged pincers and clamped down on heavy madness, trying to control him. Boom! Heavy madness slashed through space and time, trying to break the three-pronged pincers. Boom! The three-pronged pincers clamped down on heavy madness, and heavy madness's blade was caught. But at that moment, Yi Qinghan suddenly pulled out the blade's hilt, and heavy madness split into 2. There was still a child blade in the middle. Whoosh! The child blade transformed into lightning, illuminating the world. Even the light of the sun was suppressed. It was so dazzling that one could not open their eyes. Li Hua was appalled as he watched heavy madness slash at his throat. He could not even block 1 move, much less 3. He never expected a pseudo-world artifact to have a mother. Boom! Ka ka ka! A layer of armor appeared on Li Hua's right arm. He raised it forcefully in a bid to block heavy madness's attack. Poochie! Heavy madness sliced through the armor and severed Li Hua's right arm. Ah! Li Hua cried out in pain as the three-pronged pincers slipped out of his hand. Boom! Yi Qinghan raised his leg and kicked, sending Li Hua flying. He slammed into the left side of the mountain. Bang! The corner of Yi Qinghan's mouth twitched, and Madman disappeared. His body moved like lightning, and before Li Hua could land on the ground, Yi Qinghan's fist landed on Li Hua's throat. Li Hua's throat was broken, and Yi Qinghan's elbow was aimed at Li Hua's head, intending to suppress his soul. Sun Yang and Long Ziyue wanted to rush over to save him, but they were held back by Supreme Marshal Saint Tianwu. "Let him kill. Lure Revered Li out. I don't believe that Sua Feng can beat Revered Li." Supreme Marshal Saint Tianwu laughed evilly. Chapter 1407. Supreme Sky sneered and stopped the 2 commanders. He wanted to use Supreme Li to kill Yi Qinghan. When Long Ziyue and Sun Yang heard this, they immediately gave up on trying to save him. They watched as Yi Qinghan shattered Li Hua's head and took the trident pincer. Now, everyone was a bit afraid, including the two Paragon inheritors with pseudo-world weapons. They were all waiting for an opportunity to attack. They hid in the void, ready to attack at any moment. If they wanted to kill Yi Qinghan, they had to kill him in one blow. Otherwise, Yuling Yi could block their attacks. If he reacted, no one would be able to escape. After killing Li Hua, Yi Qinghan returned to his seat with the three-pronged pincers. He calmly gazed at the enemy army, thinking about how he could seize Great Dragon Mountain Province without using fire. The fire attack was a destructive attack. No one in the entire Great Dragon Mountain city could escape. There were too many innocent people and too many children. After killing so many people, even if the heavens didn't punish him, he would still have a demon in his heart. The ultimate martial realm's army was silent. The overlords who came did not say anything. The young geniuses wanted to try, but they were afraid of the pseudo-world weapons in Yi Qinghan's hands. Shua! A powerful young supreme god appeared in the valley. His eyes were disdainful and he wore plain clothes. He should be a loose cultivator without any foundation. His battle-intent sword and his king's aura was not inferior to Li Hua and Spirit King Wu Ji. I am Yunfei Yang. Suofeng, do you dare to give up your pseudo-world weapon and fight me? If I lose, you can do whatever you want. If I lose, you can do whatever you want. The youth stared at Yi Qinghan and said confidently. If you want to defeat me, you have to defeat anyone behind me. I will satisfy you and fight you. Yi Qinghan smiled. I am afraid you can't afford to lose. There is nothing to be afraid of. If I lose, you can do whatever you want to me. I will not frown. Yunfei Yang replied firmly. What about traitors? Yi Qinghan raised his eyebrows and asked. I don't belong to any realm. I come from the nine-world sky. How can I be considered a traitor? Yunfei Yang replied without hesitation. Ha ha ha, Yi Qinghan laughed. This was the best answer he could get. Wu Tian, help Martial Uncle test this Mr. Yun. Yi Qinghan said indifferently. Lin Wutian quietly appeared beside Yi Qinghan. Now, he was even more lifeless. He was like a sword, and the sword was him. Regardless of whether it was peacetime or wartime, as long as he did not show himself, it was always a sword that stood there. The solitary sword Dao was developed by him, and there were some aspects that even Gu Qingyu felt inferior to. Lin Wutian walked past Yi Qinghan. The sword will in his eyes was very solid. His proud back looked like a sword from afar. Yi Qinghan looked at Lin Wutian. Lin Wutian looked like a shadow of the past. He held a small wooden sword in his hand, and in order to take the Guangzhong test, he even wore out his shoes. That determination and that perseverance made him the person Yi Qinghan was most satisfied with. Now, only Lin Wutian, Lu Aotian, and Emperor Yi were left from the Owl Fall Star. If you defeat him, you will be qualified for me to fight. Don't kill him. Yi Qinghan was very calm. He could see that the two were evenly matched. Perhaps Yunfei Yang was stronger. At least in terms of cultivation level, Yunfei Yang was higher than Lin Wutian. He did not want Lin Wutian to die here. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. When Lin Wutian stepped into the valley, a strong wind blew. The clouds moved as if they were flying. Yunfei Yang's body emitted a powerful aura. His black hair danced, and his battle robe flapped. Force. Yunfei Yang's force was very good. With just a thought, a strong wind blew. It was as if the area of wind was his own area. Yi Qinghan sat up straight. The sword of no return appeared in his hand. His fingertips gently tapped the sword's hilt. His eyes were focused. He was ready to save Lin Wutian at any time. On the wooden stake behind Yi Qinghan, Wu Yan, Gu Qingyu, and all the other sword experts were staring at the scene in front of them. Two sword experts were fighting, and the techniques they were using were things that they would not be able to comprehend for a very long time. The techniques used in the instant of life eruption were things that even they themselves did not understand. They were just life-saving moves. Sword. Wind. Move. In the blink of an eye, Yun Fei Yang had unleashed 3 attacks. The 3 sword silhouettes were all sharp and aggressive, capable of destroying spacetime and causing space to collapse. Boom! Yun Fei Yang's blue robe fluttered. His body was like lightning. He turned into a triangle and surrounded Lin Wuqian's body. Hum! Lin Wuqian pulled out his sword. It was like a thunderbolt. The sword broke the void. One sword broke 10,000 moves. Boom! That one sword strike split apart the 3 sword strikes. The 3 divine swords formed from supreme divine power were cut apart as easily as cutting through tofu. The cold and lonely sword energy spread out in all directions. Even the people in Great Dragon Mountain City felt their hair stand on end, as though they had been struck by the sword energy. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. They were stunned by this sword. However, Yun Fei Yang was not shocked. Instead, his aura became stronger. Wind rises. Soul returning sword, breaking 4 directions. Swoosh! 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 All of a sudden, the sky was filled with sword shadows. Every sword shadow pierced through the surrounding rocks and crushed the sky with the force of thunder. They destroyed the shackles in front of them as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. They then arrived in front of Lin Wuqian. Swoosh! The sword chi pierced through Lin Wuqian's clothes. Lin Wuqian danced in the sky. His sword moved in all directions. It was as fast as lightning. Both of them were extremely fast. One of them was attacking faster and faster, while the other was defending more and more tightly. Lin Wuqian's defense was very tight. However, it was obvious that he was being pushed back by Yun Fei Yang. Swoosh! A sword chi pierced through Lin Wuqian's defense and pierced through his divine robe. There was no fear in Lin Wuqian's eyes. However, the sword in his hand could not keep up with the rhythm. Yun Fei Yang was faster than him. He was as ethereal as the wind. Wuqian is no match for him. Gu Qingyu took a deep breath. This was the first time he had seen someone who could defeat Lin Wuqian with a sword. This person's strength was not inferior to anyone in the crazy sect. If he had a pseudo-boundary weapon, he could fight with Yi Qinghan. Mu Zhuang and the others were also shocked. They were watching the battle between 2 sword masters. If they were not careful, they would die. Their state of mind was quietly changing. Their vision was broadening. Swoosh! At the same time, at least several dozen experts' Dao hearts were shattered by the 2 of them. They spat out a mouthful of essence blood, their eyes lifelessly looking towards the valley. They knew that they would never be able to surpass them in this lifetime, their cultivation realms completely stagnating in the future. Man and sword as one. Yun Fei Yang turned into a divine sword, piercing through the clouds. He descended from the sky and attacked Lin Wuqian. Boom! Crack! Crack! Lin Wuqian also turned into a sword and attacked. The 2 swords collided. The sword in his hand turned into rotten wood. It was broken by Yun Fei Yang. His body flew backward. He could only watch as Yun Fei Yang's sword came for his body. Swoosh! Yi Qinghan's sword of no return turned into lightning. It flew out of his hand and collided with Yun Fei Yang's sword. The supreme divine power tore apart Yun Fei Yang's imposing manner. Chapter 1408. If the momentum was defeated, the person would be defeated. Yun Fei Yang was sent flying by the sword of no return. He retreated several hundred meters and appeared at the end of the valley. He looked at Yi Qinghan in disbelief. Yi Qinghan remained seated in his original spot. He stretched out his hand and forcefully took away the sword of no return as he spoke indifferently. Your sword moves are very powerful and should be self-created. However, there are some flaws. If you follow me, this commander will allow you to ascend to the top of the clouds. Everywhere you look will be a domain. When your body moves, the clouds will move. When your heart moves, the heavens will move. When your heart moves, the heavens will move. Yun Feiyang was stunned by Yi Qinghan's simple strike. His 10 fingers gripped the broken soaring cloud sword tightly, his heart aching. This was a paramount divine sword that he had built up over a long period of time, and he had taken great care of it on a daily basis. If the sword was there, he would be there. If the sword was gone, he would be defeated. Yun Feiyang was silent for a long time. Just based on Yi Qinghan's move just now, it was clear that he was much stronger than him. There was no need to continue fighting. Brother Feiyang, I'll give you the time it takes for an incense stick to burn to consider. You can choose to retreat, or you can choose to help me. Of course, you can also choose to die. This is your right. This is my respect for a king. Yi Qinghan stood up and looked at Yun Feiyang, giving him sufficient respect. A soldier quickly lit an incense stick. Everyone's attention was on him, waiting for Yun Feiyang's decision. Yun Feiyang, don't betray us. Otherwise, the ultimate martial realm would be condemned by everyone. His reputation will be tarnished. Supreme Sky Martial Emperor said in a deep voice. Yun Feiyang, you have to think carefully about what you do. The resources that Suofeng can give you, my ultimate martial realm can also give you. There's no need to do that. Long Ziyue also reminded in a deep voice. The corner of Yun Feiyang's mouth twitched. He wasn't trying to be a beggar. This was his principle. The reason why he hadn't pledged his loyalty to the royal family was because he didn't want to be controlled and ordered around. If Yi Qinghan could give him enough respect, then there was no harm in submitting to him since he had lost to him. In Yun Feiyang's heart, there was no distinction between worlds. In his heart, there was only the 9 worlds, and only the strong were respected. Time passed bit by bit. Half of the incense stick had been burned. The surroundings of the great Dragon Mountain city were so quiet that only the sound of the wind could be heard. Yun Feiyang was very strong. The fact that he could defeat Lin Wuqian was proof that he only lacked a foundation. With the support of a pseudo-world artifact, the top 5 rankings of the ultimate martial realm would definitely change. Yun Feiyang's breathing quickened, but Yi Qinghan remained expressionless. How does Marshal Zhuo treat me? Yun Feiyang stared at Yi Qinghan and asked in a deep voice. Yi Qinghan smiled and said, I've already said that we'll treat each other as brothers. You can leave or stay as you wish. No one can order you around, including me. I won't make things difficult for you. Whoosh! Woo-woo. The wind was howling, and dust was flying everywhere. A figure was dashing out from outside the great Dragon Mountain city. The sword shadow pierced through the void, aiming straight for Yun Feiyang's back. The Sky Martial Saint would not allow Yun Feiyang to betray him. Thus, he took the initiative to use his killing move. His sword pierced through heaven and earth, wanting to kill Yun Feiyang. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan turned into a sharp arrow. The sword rainbow was like a ray of light. The sword of no return instantly pierced through Yun Feiyang's neck and clashed with the sword in the Sky Martial Saint's hand. Yi Qinghan casually pulled Yun Feiyang behind him. He had complete trust in Yun Feiyang. He was also testing whether Yun Feiyang would attack or not. Bang! Boom! Whoosh! Whoosh! The sharp sword in the Sky Martial Saint's hand pushed Yi Qinghan back with a thunderous force. However, Yun Feiyang was also taken away by him. Thank you, General Sky Marshal Saint, for sending me off. You're welcome. Yi Qinghan returned to his original position and smiled evilly as he said hoarsely. The Sky Marshal Saint's face was gloomy. His facial muscles were twitching. He wanted nothing more than to cut Yi Qinghan into 8 pieces with his sword to vent his anger. In the 9 worlds heaven, the strong are respected. For a peak independent cultivator, there is no such thing as a mother world. There is no such thing as betraying a world. General Sky Marshal Saint, there is no need to be angry. Yi Qinghan said in a melodious voice. However, at that moment, the air between heaven and earth froze. Even the wind stopped. The sand and stones were frozen in midair. The area within a radius of 1,000 miles had been turned into a domain by the strong. Even the paramount gods could not take back control of Great Dragon Mountain City. Yi Qinghan's face changed slightly. The Sky Marshal Saint was even more shocked. He looked around, trying to find the location of the intruder. Yi Qinghan quickly retreated a few steps. He threw the trident pincers and the sword of no return to Sky Venerable Nangong and Lin Wujian. The people of the insane sect held the 7 pseudo-world weapons in their hands and formed a huge defensive circle. It was enough to form a small domain within the domain, enveloping all the people of the insane sect. A figure in white clothes stepped out from the void. It seemed slow, but in fact, the figure that had just appeared on the horizon arrived in front of everyone in a moment. She stood on the peak of the valley and looked down on everyone. Her long hair fluttered in the wind. She had a beauty that could captivate even birds and beasts. Her slender legs were like javelins. Her perfect face was full of vicissitudes. She looked like a 20-year-old girl, but also like an existence that had lived for more than 10 epochs and crossed countless civilizations. Xiao Yu paled in comparison to such a peerless expert. She was simply perfect. This woman was like a goddess. No one could blaspheme her. No one could look at her directly. The Sky Marshal Saint and the other experts of the ultimate martial realm all walked out. They bowed and said, "Greetings, Senior." Even the Sky Marshal Saint's inheritors, who were hidden in space and holding pseudo-world weapons, did not dare to be presumptuous. They revealed their true bodies and bowed. The woman did not return the greeting. She only looked coldly at Suofeng. Her slender hand waved and the sword of no return in Lin Wuqian's hand broke free. It appeared in the woman's hand. She gently stroked it. The supreme pseudo-world weapon sword of no return sword aura shot into the sky. 10,000 swords, including the pseudo-world weapon in Gu Qingyu's hand, resonated and whistled in the sky. Whing! The divine swords trembled and shot into the sky, attaching themselves to the woman's side. If one could not guess her identity by now, they would be fools. The sword of no return. For a woman to have such a domineering name, her cultivation must be extraordinary. Even the Realm Lord had to give her some face. She was the lover of all the experts in the past. There was no one who did not have a crush on her. However, she was still alone. She did not even have a servant. She could only be admired from afar. "Who are you? Why do you say you are an old friend?" Jian Bugue looked directly at Yi Qinghan. His voice was hoarse and majestic. It made people tremble and goosebumps rise. His voice was pleasant to the ears, but everyone who heard it felt their hair stand on end. Once the sword is unsheathed, the sword will not return until the enemy is dead. Master Jian is still so voluptuous. You are indeed the lover of the masses. You are an absolute beauty who makes countless overlords bow down to you. Yi Qinghan let go of the insure pot in his hand and sighed. Jian Bugue frowned slightly. Her beautiful face was filled with doubt. She was sure that she did not know Yi Qinghan. However, how did Yi Qinghan know her? Especially the phrase, "Once the sword is unsheathed, the sword will not return until the enemy is dead." Other than those people in the past, who else would remember this phrase? The descendant of an old friend? Or the reincarnation of an old friend? Jian Bugui asked seriously. Master Jian, why are you so hung up on this identity? When you find out, you will know even if I don't tell you. You should not know now. Even if you kill me, you will not get any information. This time, I brought you here because I hope that you can protect the sword of no return. Other than you, no one else in the world is worthy of using it. Letting a second-rate junior use it will bring shame to the name of the sword of no return. It will also tarnish Master Jian's reputation. I hope that Master Jian will cherish it. Yi Qinghan said calmly. Jian Bugui was more and more convinced that Yi Qinghan was the reincarnation of an important person in the past. Otherwise, he would not keep calling her Master Jian. This was because she liked it the most when people called her Master Jian. Chapter 1409. Jian Bugui was like a goddess that could not be blasphemed. He stood on the mountain peak with his white robe fluttering as he stared at Yi Qinghan. Yi Qinghan seemed to understand Jian Bugui very well. He stood in front of him with a smile on his face. His faint confidence made Jian Bugui even more confused. He could vaguely see some clues from his temperament, but he could not connect him to the father of the Great Desolation. Jian Bugui moved his fingers and his sword hilt moved. He wanted to force out Yi Qinghan's identity, but Yi Qinghan shook his head and transmitted his voice, Lord Jian, it's better if you don't make a move. As long as you remember, when the Great Desolation moves, the sky and clouds shake. When the 9 worlds return to one, the sword cannot return. Jian Bugui on the mountain peak moved and asked with a hoarse voice, which one of them are you? Yi Qinghan did not speak. Saying this was already his bottom line. Lord Jian. I beg you to help the ultimate martial realm. We don't have a pseudo-world artifact. It will be difficult to fight against the Snow World army that has 5 pseudo-world artifacts. Supreme Martial Emperor knelt on one knee and pleaded. I beg Lord Jian to make a move. Show the might of our ultimate martial realm. Long Ziyue and Sun Yang did not care about their faces as they knelt on one knee and pleaded. I beg Lord Jian to make a move. Show the might of our ultimate martial realm. Millions of soldiers and civilians said in unison. They were incomparably firm as they hoped to use morality to force Jian Bugui to make a move. Jian Bugui looked coldly at Sun Yang, Supreme Martial Emperor and the other 2 commanders. He said calmly, I have not participated in the affairs of the world for many years. Even Hierarch Wu Ji would not force me, let alone you little things. Supreme Martial Emperor's mouth twitched and he did not dare to speak anymore. The heaven and earth were deathly silent. The wind swayed the forest and the fallen leaves danced in the sky. It was filled with killing intent. The fallen leaves were extremely sharp and could pierce through rocks. Just at this moment, a pressure appeared in the sky and spread over 100 miles. Even Jian Bugui was controlled by it. The fiery heat wave swept across the land and swept up dust and sand. Humph! Jian Bugui snorted coldly. His scabbard moved and a sword light tore through the pressure. The sword had already returned to its scabbard. It was so fast that it was impossible to follow its trajectory. For a woman to be able to use a sword to such an extent, it was already heaven-defying. Li Feng, Gu Qingyu, and the other sword experts were also stunned by this move. It was as if this sword could destroy heaven and earth. If this sword was aimed at them, they would have already died without any room to resist. Yi Qinghan's eyes narrowed. Who would have thought that Jian Bugui's cultivation had improved so much? He was already infinitely close to the pseudo-sector Lord Great Circle level. However, his attack power was slightly stronger than a pseudo-sector Lord Great Circle level Great Circle. The sword was the king of weapons and specialized in attacking. This was Jian Bugui's advantage. A beam of sword chi shot out from Jian Bugui's sword-like eyebrows. Jian Bugui stared at the silhouette that appeared from the spatial tear. The old and sinister expert who appeared was wearing a red robe. He looked like a scorching sun that burned people's eyes. However, when he saw Jian Bugui, his eyes were filled with awkwardness. He hurriedly bowed and said, "So Lord Jian is also here. Sorry for my rudeness." Jian Bugui stared unhappily at the newcomer and said coldly, "Reveredly, I hate it when people use their energy to lock onto me. This is the second time you have touched my bottom line." So this person was Reveredly, the teacher of revered spirit King Wuji. Reveredly could burn everything in the universe. He had once refined a pseudo-world weapon by himself. He wasn't afraid of anything except for Jian Bugui. However, he also hoped to see her because the feeling of having a crush on someone wasn't good. It was a pity that his luck wasn't too good. Every time he was angry, he would meet Jian Bugui and touch her bottom line. Revered Li's sinister face was filled with awkwardness. He kept bowing and smiling bitterly, "Lord Jian, please don't be angry. I was so angry that I lost my mind and locked onto this place. I didn't expect you to be here too." Yi Qinghan smiled evilly. This kind of trash was worthy of having a crush on Jian Bugui. He was simply looking for trouble. Those who liked Jian Bugui in the past were all overlords of a world or peak pseudo-world lords. Even the weakest were peak pseudo-world lords. This Revered Li's cultivation wasn't bad, but compared to them, the difference was too big. Humph. Jian Bugui snorted coldly and didn't say anything else. He was too lazy to argue with Revered Li. After all, they were experts of a world. If they fought, those old things would definitely be involved. At that time, there would be a lot of worldly wisdom. This wasn't something she liked. When Revered Li saw that Jian Bugui didn't argue anymore, he heaved a sigh of relief. He turned to look at Yi Qinghan and the others. Finally, he locked onto Li Feng and said gloomily, "Brat, you're the one who killed my beloved grandson and stole the three-pronged pincer." Li Feng held the three-pronged pincer and became the scapegoat. However, how could Yi Qinghan let him take the blame? He extended his hand and took the three-pronged pincer. He caressed the pincer and said indifferently, "Li Hua was killed by me. Revered Li, you want to take revenge for him? You're really daring. Since you know me, you still dared to kill Li Hua and steal the three-pronged pincer. Are you challenging me?" Revered Li asked coldly. The ultimate martial realm army was excited. They finally attracted a terrifying existence who also had enmity with Yi Qinghan. As long as they destroy the Snow Kingdom army's momentum and suppress their commander, let's see how arrogant the Snow Kingdom army can be. Supreme Martial Realm and the others were also excited. Their eyes shined brightly as they looked expectantly at Revered Li. They smiled, but when they looked at Yi Qinghan's expression, they were stunned. Yi Qinghan's face was full of smiles, as if he wasn't afraid of Li Zun at all. He casually took a few steps forward and said faintly, "That's right, I'm challenging you. I want to lure you out and send you to your death. Are you ready?" SSSSS. Hundreds of overlords sucked in a breath of cold air. They had never seen such an arrogant person. A pinnacle realm cultivator actually dared to challenge a pseudo-pinnacle realm master. This was like a child challenging an adult. Revered Li frowned and looked at Yi Qinghan. He said coldly, "Just you?" "Ha ha ha," Yi Qinghan laughed loudly, "Of course it's not just me. My left martial residence has 6 people. It's more than enough to kill you." Shua. Li Feng, Gu Qingyu, Shi Gu, Xiao Yu and Jiang Jingtian stepped in front of Yi Qinghan. They were all holding pseudo-world weapons. Yi Qinghan wiped away the consciousness in the three-pronged pincer and handed it over to Li Feng. He then summoned the Yin clan pot. The 6 pseudo-world weapons resonated with each other and their aura soared into the sky. Jian Bugui didn't stop them and looked at Yi Qinghan with interest. He hoped that they would fight so that they could confirm Yi Qinghan's identity. Reveredly looked at the 6 pseudo-world weapons and frowned. His eyes were serious. These 6 people weren't easy to deal with, and they all had pseudo-world weapons. It was like 6 children using divine weapons against an adult. Once hit by the pseudo-world weapons, even a pseudo-realm master would be injured. You want to kill me? Do you know me? Reveredly frowned and asked. Yi Qinghan's lips curled up. Energy erupted from his body and the Yin clan pot was activated. The world energy tore everything apart and formed a huge whirlpool. He pointed the mouth of the pot at Reveredly and said firmly, I don't just know you. Brothers, attack. Chapter 14:10. Yi Qinghan ordered. The 6 experts tore through the void with their pseudo-world weapons. Rainbow light surrounded Li Zun with world power. Obviously, Yi Qinghan wanted to lure Li Zun over and kill him. Reveredly was not an idiot. He immediately saw through the situation. This posture was directed at him. One would not fight an unprepared battle. Since the Zhuo marshal's mansion was directed at him, they had a certain degree of confidence in killing him. A bunch of ants want to kill me with pseudo-world weapons? Dream on. Today, I'll kill you all. Rumble. Li Zun turned into a flaming wing and flapped in the sky. He hooked his finger and the pseudo-world lord's soul was forcefully sucked in. He wanted to snatch the 3-pronged pincer. However, the soul on the pincer had been erased and Li Feng had recognized it as its master. Rumble. Hua. Xiaoya attacked first. Lightning covered the sky and engulfed the mountain peak. Clouds covered the sky and the long mountain city was plunged into darkness. The lightning dragon roared and swam in the sky, attacking Li Zun. Rumble. Immediately afterward, Jiang Jingtian's spear pierced through the void with an imposing aura. Shi Ji's brick turned into a palm leaf fan. He swung it at Li Zun. Gu Qinyu became one with his sword. Together with the 5 experts, they blocked off all the blind spots. Rumble. Yi Qinghan stomped on the ground and rushed into the clouds. He opened Yinshir's pot. It covered the sky and shot out a beam of 10-colored light. It enveloped Li Zun and kept suppressing him. Reveredly was shocked. He didn't dare to fight against Yi Qinghan's Yinshir's pot. The mouth of the pot was like hell. Once someone was trapped inside, they wouldn't be able to walk out alive. He charged forward, trying to find a way out. However, the experts around him were all pseudo-world weapons. The most he could do was push him back. Before he could rush out, Gu Qingyu's sword blocked him. Boom! Boom! The valley was razed to the ground, but Jian Bugui's feet were as stable as a boundary weapon. Not even a pebble was broken. Her clothes did not move at all. She watched quietly. Her starry eyes stared at Yi Qinghan, but she realized that Yi Qinghan was only using his terrifying soul power to suppress Li Zun. What a powerful soul! At the very least, it should be at the peak of the pseudo-world lord realm. Who is that old friend of mine? Yun Tianfei? Mu Jiujie? The warlord of the Grand Desolation? Back then, there were only a few people who had reached this level of cultivation, and they were the only ones who died. Which of the 3 of them was it? Jian Bugui tightened his grip on the no-return sword and suddenly realized that Yi Qinghan's eyes were filled with murderous intent. Jian Bugui shuddered and seemed to have guessed it. Impossible. How can he still reincarnate after being besieged by 7 realms masters? But if it wasn't him, why would he hate Reveredly so much? Shio. The sword light flashed past and chi energy shot out in all directions. However, they all passed 3 meters away from Jian Bugui. Even Reveredly didn't want to provoke this terrifying goddess-level existence. Boom! Li Zun, with his majestic world power, punched the stone brick. The world power attached to his fist and the world power on the stone brick tore each other apart. Unexpectedly, Shirgu was sent flying several thousand meters away. He fiercely crashed outside the Snow Border Army's camp, and the table in front of him was smashed into pieces. Unfortunately, Revered Li still couldn't rush over. His punch could only send Shirgu flying, but it couldn't block Gu Qingyu's peak sword. His fist was scratched and blood splattered everywhere. Towards the center. Yi Qinghan kept waving the Incher's pot, trying to suck him into the pot. Unfortunately, Revered Li's cultivation was too strong. Even with the 6 masters working together, they could only keep the pot steady and could not catch him. Within 1,000 meters of the valley, other than Jian Bugue, no one else could join the battle. The 3 commanders of the Great Dragon Mountain City wanted to take this opportunity to attack the Snow Border Army. However, the army couldn't break through. Even if they could go around the mountain path, the 3 experts couldn't fight against so many Snow Border Army. They could only watch helplessly. The black holes around the valley kept being pulled out. The mountain rocks turned into dust and were swallowed by the black holes. The colorful and flying sand and stones were soul-stealing and life-threatening. The Incher pot couldn't catch Revered Li. Yi Qinghan smirked and a powerful energy rushed out of his body. He directly took away the Incher pot and descended from the sky with Zhong Kuang in his hand. His blade swept across the 9 heavens and cut open the void as he attacked Revered Li. Revered Li was overjoyed. He couldn't kill the others with the pseudo-world weapon, but couldn't he cripple Yi Qinghan? Die for me. Revered Li engulfed in flames and attacked Yi Qinghan. The power of the world poured out and turned into a giant hand that grabbed at Zhong Kuang. The fire poured down and wanted to burn Yi Qinghan alive. However, he miscalculated. Yi Qinghan's originally ordinary blade exploded with the power of the world halfway. Qi energy shot out in all directions and along with the blade, it tore apart the giant hand and attacked Revered Li. Revered Li was shocked but he still didn't change his strategy. He wanted to kill Yi Qinghan first and then escape. The giant hand grabbed at Zhong Kuang without hesitation. The supreme Li fire surrounded Yi Qinghan. Puchi. The heavy frenzy pierced through Reverend Li's defense. The blood and qi of a fake world overlord ignited the supreme Li fire, incinerating the heavens. However, the supreme Li fire didn't burn Yi Qinghan to death. Instead, a portion of it was controlled by Yi Qinghan and he retaliated against Reverend Li. Fire of the world, in my name, burn the heavens. The fire elemental origin affected the flames. The qi energy attacked and Revered Li and Yi Qinghan were sent flying. Revered Li's arm was almost shattered by Zhong Kuang. His palm was almost cut open. Boom! The supreme Li fire exploded and scattered in all directions. It would definitely ignite upon contact. However, the 5 great experts hid behind their pseudo-world weapons and used their world powers to block the might of the supreme Li fire. However, the mountain range outside Great Dragon Mountain City was set ablaze. The star Li fire could burn the sky. Hua! Heaven and earth were covered in a fiery red expanse. Quite a few experts in the periphery were infected by the unparalleled Li fire. They were like evil karma, unable to struggle free, and were instantly burned into fine powder. Boom! Revered Li fell on the ground and shattered the mountain rocks. His body was still pushed back dozens of meters before he stopped. His face was pale. He looked at his right hand that was almost crippled. It was cut to the bone. The power of the world couldn't heal it in a short time because Yi Qinghan's attack was too terrifying. The power of the world and the power of destruction intertwined. The injury couldn't be healed in a short time. Die for me. The stone song erupted, lifting up the stone bricks to suppress them. Boom! Hua. Space and time were crushed. The qi energy hit the ground and sent sand and stones everywhere. Revered Li punched the sky, wanting to knock away the stone bricks. However, the other 4 experts all rushed into the sky and supported Shirgu. Boom! Ka ka ka! Li Zun stood up forcefully. His face was ferocious. His hands were holding up the sky. He wanted to block the suppression of the 5 great elites. His legs were twisted and sank into the ground. Once he was suppressed, his bones would be crushed by the pseudo-world item. Chapter 14:11. Li Xun's hands held the sky as his body was pressed into the ground. His bones were twisted from the pressure of the 5 great universe weapons. The 5 top-notch kings brought with them the power of the world. They mobilized the power of heaven and earth, trying to crush Li Xun. Buzz! Yi Qinghan flipped his long knife. The blade was threatening. Swoosh! Yi Qinghan's knife sliced through the ground. The knife light cut through the mountain and broke through all 4 directions. He went into the long mountain city. But Yi Qinghan was still gathering power. He wanted to cut Li Xun in half. Mr. Jian, save me. Li Xun was terrified. He couldn't break free from the suppression of the 5 great pseudo-universe weapons and the 5 kings. He could only watch as Yi Qinghan gathered power. He knew that Yi Qinghan's knife could definitely cut him in half. Hong! Yi Qinghan moved his feet lightly. He moved his long knife behind him. He didn't look at Jian Bugui. He slashed at Li Xun. This saber seemed to want to tear apart time and space. This saber seemed to want to destroy the world. It shook the entire universe, and all the worlds in all directions had to submit to it. An unparalleled aura of an emperor erupted, and even Jian Bugui was stunned. Jian Bugui's jade-like fingers had just touched the hilt of his sword when he saw the power of Yi Qinghan's blade. His pupils shrank, his body trembled, and his chest trembled. He muttered to himself hoarsely, "It's really you. Are you back for revenge?" Just as Jian Bugui was stunned, Yi Qinghan's power was like a rainbow. He tore the river apart. The mountain under Jian Bugui's feet was cut from the bottom. Hong! Hong! This knife power was like a rainbow. It split the sky and the earth. It swept past Li Xun's body unstoppably. Poochie! There was a muffled sound. It was like the sound of a knife cutting through steel. It was ear-piercing and soul-disturbing. Li Xun's defense couldn't block Yi Qinghan's knife. His body was cut open. In that instant, he didn't bleed. But he couldn't withstand the suppression of the 5 great universe weapons. His body was instantly crushed into powder. Ah! Li Xun's last scream turned into a long howl. It was ear-piercing and tore apart the souls of the experts outside. Poof! Caught off guard, many of the soldiers coughed up blood and fell to the ground, unable to get up. Some of them even died because of their screams. Revered Li was dead. Sun Yang, Supreme Martial Emperor, and the other 2 commanders looked at the ravaged valley in horror. They found it hard to believe. A pseudo-sector Lord Pinnacle actually couldn't beat the combined forces of 6 supreme kings. How terrifying were their cultivations. Although the pseudo-world item had increased their power by dozens of times, any other peak paramount god wouldn't have been able to kill Reverend Li. Reverend Li's world power alone made him immune to paramount god attacks. Unfortunately, he still died. Yi Qinghan sheathed his blade and stared coldly at the 3 supreme commanders. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile as he issued an ultimatum. He said coldly, "I'll give you 1 night to consider. If you don't submit, I'll attack with fire tomorrow morning. When that time comes, I'll bury all of you in this sea of fire." Whoosh! Yi Qinghan activated the Yinsher pot and sucked all the Li fire that Li Xun had just unleashed into the pot. Hiss! Hiss! Everyone in Great Dragon Mountain City sucked in a cold breath as they broke out in cold sweat. Once the Li fire surrounded Great Dragon Mountain City, everyone here would be burned alive. Jian Bugui frowned slightly and reminded him softly, "Dao friend, isn't this going against the heavens?" Ha ha ha. Yi Qinghan looked like he was laughing maniacally, but his expression was extremely ugly. Killing intent shot out in all directions as he roared hoarsely, going against the heavens? If this is going against the heavens, what's the big deal about what happened back then? Back then. Jian Bugue gripped the hilt of his sword and kept moving it up and down. He wanted to stop Yi Qinghan, but he didn't have a good reason. Sigh. I was powerless back then. Today, I'll still stand aside and watch. Who will win and who will lose will be decided by the heavens. Jian Bugue pondered for a while and finally made a decision. Humph. Yi Qinghan snorted coldly. His domineering aura shot up to the heavens and his voice was like thunder. My life is in my hands, not the heavens. I can't win against the heavens, but it can't control my will either. From now on, I'm the equal of Heaven Battle Master. Those who go against me will be turned into ashes. Those who follow me will be filled with gods and Buddhas. Hua! Yi Qinghan waved his hand. Flames formed his robe and mountain-splitting armor. His robe fluttered in the wind and his aura was stronger than the heavens. Jian Bugue sighed and said faintly, "You're still as arrogant and unruly as before. If you weren't so unyielding and willing to lower your head, things wouldn't have turned out this way. You and I might. I'm me and I won't submit to anyone. Right is right and wrong is wrong. I'm not wrong, so why should I admit that I'm wrong?" Yi Qinghan asked in a low voice. No one dared to interrupt the conversation between the two. The three supreme commanders were a little angry. Jian Bugue was from the same generation as Jian Bugue. It seemed like he had some emotional entanglements with Jian Bugue. Jian Bugue definitely wouldn't make a move. Their eyes were filled with fear. Once the fire attack started, no one in Great Dragon Mountain City would survive. You, take care of yourself. I didn't help you back then. Even if I did, I wouldn't be able to change the outcome. Now, I still won't help you. Naturally, I won't help them. I'll still say the same thing. Life and death are in your hands. Riches and honor are in the hands of the heavens. Jian Bugue held his sword and left. Yi Qinghan watched her leave silently. His eyes were filled with complicated emotions. He wasn't surprised that Jian Bugue recognized him. He wasn't surprised that she didn't betray him either. Back then, there were tens of millions of people who chased after this goddess. However, there were only a few dozen people who walked at the front. Yi Qinghan and Jian Bugue were both arrogant people. Although they liked each other, they didn't break through the barrier between them. They only had a spiritual connection and didn't have any real emotional interaction. If I had understood earlier back then, perhaps things wouldn't be like this. However, I don't regret it. In this life, I'm happier. I have true love and brothers. I have no regrets. Yi Qinghan looked at Jian Bugue deeply. He knew that the feelings from back then had been buried by time. Jian Bugue wouldn't share a man with others. No one would. Someone as arrogant as Jian Bugue wouldn't even say that she liked him, let alone be his concubine. Yi Qinghan slowly retreated. When he was halfway back, he suddenly stopped and stared in the direction Jian Bugue left. If it's possible, we can talk alone. A soul ripple appeared in Yi Qinghan's sea of consciousness. His voice was gentle, but there was a hint of unwillingness. Phew, Yi Qinghan exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and secretly nodded. He returned to the army camp and arranged for the army to be stationed outside the valley. He waited until late at night and quietly left the army camp. Swoosh! Swoosh! Swoosh swoosh swoosh, Yi Qinghan performed a space-time jump and teleported thousands of miles away. He chased after Jian Bugue and appeared in a valley within an extreme mountain range. There were peach blossoms for hundreds of miles and there was a large lake at the foot of the peach blossom mountain. Jian Bugue's back was facing the valley. Her long hair fluttered in the wind. Her toes were drawing circles on the grass. She looked like a young girl. Chapter 14:12. Jian Bugui was like a young girl who didn't know anything about the world. His actions were childish and he didn't have the aura of someone who could kill Jian Bugui if he didn't draw his sword. Yi Qinghan appeared in the valley. Under the moonlight, the peach blossoms within 100 miles were all red. It was extremely beautiful. Compared to Jian Bugui's face, everything else seemed like a contrast. I didn't expect that we would meet again. Jian Bugui didn't turn around and said softly. It was just a matter of time. I was so stubborn that even hell couldn't be bothered to take me in. Yi Qinghan came beside Jian Bugui and sat on a rock. He looked at the lake and said calmly. Dong dong dong, their hearts beat together and complemented each other. What is your ultimate goal for coming back this time? To destroy the 7 realms as a sacrifice for the dead in the wilderness? Jian Bugui asked softly. Since you don't care about the affairs of the world, why do you want to know my goal? Yi Qinghan smiled and asked. Jian Bugui was speechless. She said that she didn't care about the affairs of the world, but how could she stay out of it? How many innocent people would die if she destroyed the 7 realms? She looked cruel and merciless, but deep in her heart, perhaps only Yi Qinghan could understand her weakness. You came to find me just to ask about my ultimate goal. Yi Qinghan turned his head and looked at the seductive face. Her eyes were extremely invasive, from her face all the way to her ankles. It was no wonder that everyone in the world would go crazy for her, causing the realm lords of the 7 realms to fight each other. That kind of indescribable temperament caused the hormones of men to become restless and restless. There was an irrepressible feeling. No one would ignore such a woman. Yi Qinghan was no exception. Moreover, they had a good impression of each other back then. Yes. I want to know. To avoid Yi Qinghan's invasive gaze, Jian Bugui slowly squatted by the lake. He pulled out the no-return sword and stirred it in the water. His left hand was restless and he didn't know where to put it. He kept pulling his hair back. His every move was filled with charm. Yi Qinghan remained silent. He did not want to drag Jian Bugui into his vengeance. He did not want to use Jian Bugui as a bargaining chip to take revenge on the world lords of the 7 realms. This was his bottom line and he would never cross it. Restore order. Yi Qinghan took a deep breath and said firmly. If we succeed, what will happen to the fate of the 7 realms lords? Jian Bugui asked. Die. Yi Qinghan was a man of few words, leaving no room for negotiation. Where are their direct descendants? Jian Bugui asked again. It's still death. There's no other path for them to take. All those who participated in it must die. Yi Qinghan said coldly. I understand. The Peach Blossom Valley quieted down once again. Other than the wind blowing and the falling peach blossoms, there was only the sound of the 2 people breathing. If it's possible, I'm willing to take action in exchange for the lives of millions of innocent people. Is that okay? Jian Bugui finally looked straight at Yi Qinghan and asked seriously. No need. I'll kill those who deserve to be killed. I'm not interested in killing those who shouldn't be killed. Yi Qinghan shook his head. He was still unwilling to let Jian Bugui interfere. Since he could not give her a peaceful life, he would not drag her into danger. Jian Bugui understood the deeper meaning behind Yi Qinghan's words. Do you have a wife? Jian Bugui asked in a trembling voice. Yes. I have a wife. Yi Qinghan lowered his head and replied. Ha! Congratulations. You were all alone back then. Now you finally have a successor. Jian Bugui smiled bitterly. He turned his back to Yi Qinghan and did not want him to see her in such a sorry state. Are you still alone? Yi Qinghan sighed and asked. Yes. Jian Bugui replied softly. An inexplicable feeling filled the 100 Miles Peach Blossom Mountain. Neither of them was willing to say it out loud. They were both not alone and could not act recklessly. The two of them were silent. One of them sat on a rock and touched the rock with both hands. The other squatted beside the lake and stirred the clear lake water. A gust of wind blew and the weeping willows beside the lake swayed. Come and sit. Yi Qinghan was silent for a long time before he said to Jian Bugui. Jian Bugui hesitated for a while but eventually sat behind Yi Qinghan. The two of them sat back to back and maintained a distance from each other. They did not touch each other's skin. The night wind blew their black hair and tangled it. Do you love her, all of them? Jian Bugui asked curiously. Yes. Yi Qinghan nodded affirmatively. All of them? How many do you love? Jian Bugui asked in surprise. 3. One of them has already passed away because of me. To Jian Qinxue, it might be more of a familial love. To my son, it is the purest love, Yi Qinghan explained softly. The two of them were like old friends. Or perhaps they were old friends. They were sharing their stories. Jian Bugui wanted to ask, what about me, but she was too proud to do so. The stars and moonlight swayed on the surface of the lake. The valley was very bright and the spiritual energy filled the air. Time passed slowly and the originally slow time seemed to have sped up at this moment. It's almost daybreak. You should go back. Jian Bugui stood up and said softly. All right. Let's meet again if there's a chance. Yi Qinghan took a deep breath and stood up slowly. He turned to look at Jian Bugui's perfect face and figure and revealed an evil smile. Dong dong dong. Jian Bugui's heart almost stopped. She was mesmerized by this evil smile. She took a few steps back and maintained a certain distance. After nodding, she turned and disappeared into the 100 Miles Peach Blossom Mountain. Yi Qinghan looked at her disappearing back but knew that she did not leave. She was standing in the depths and looking at him. He turned and left, leaving Jian Bugui with a lonely back view. Some lovers could not be together. They both knew that in their hearts, but they were both very proud and unwilling to speak. Yi Qinghan walked resolutely in the night. He walked on the lake and occasionally passed through the forest. He gradually approached the outskirts of the Great Dragon Mountain City. Both sides were at daggers drawn. However, the three commanders in the Great Dragon Mountain City were as anxious as ants on a hot pan. They paced back and forth. That Swafone will definitely set fire to the mountain, Sun Yang said in a low voice. When that happens, who knows how many people will die? We will suffer great losses. We cannot sit here and wait for death, Prime Tianwu said. We can either retreat to the outskirts of the Dragon Mountain State and rebuild our defenses or counterattack through the night. However, if we counterattack, we will be at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. Our pseudo-world weapons are not as good as theirs. We have no chance of winning. I personally think we should retreat and ask the royal family for help. I support General Tianwu's suggestion, Long Ziyue quickly said. I believe His Majesty will understand our difficulties. The three commanders discussed for half the night and finally decided to retreat. They immediately left behind a group of men of sacrifice to guard the valley. They took advantage of the night to take away all the troops and resources, leaving behind an empty city. The distance between the two camps was too far. Even Gu Qingyu didn't notice that they had already led the army away. By the time Yi Qinghan returned, he discovered that other than some villagers on the outskirts of Great Dragon Mountain City and some powerless clans, all the experts had already retreated. Chapter 14-13. As the sky gradually brightened, Yi Qinghan appeared in the valley. With a sweep of his divine sense, he knew that the city was empty. The three great commanders had already escaped with the army and the powerful families. Only the common people were left. The monk can run, but the temple can't. Yi Qinghan muttered to himself and mobilized the army to enter the Long Mountain city. The city was in a mess. Everything that could be taken away was taken away, and everything that could not be taken away was destroyed. Only an empty house was left. The people around the Long Mountain city were valiant, but they were suppressed by the Snow World army. They all hid in the village and relied on the natural defense. After a night of fear, they found that the army only occupied the city and did not disturb the common people. Even the common people in the city were not disturbed. Only then did they feel relieved. Yi Qinghan first pacified the common people in the city and completely controlled the city. He occupied the favorable terrain and built defensive structures. He was not in a hurry to attack the central region of the ultimate martial world. In the ultimate martial world's imperial palace, Emperor Wujimu was furious. The four great armies were defeated by the Snow Country's Divine World's army. They lost more than 10 cities, and even the Long Mountain city was lost. All that was left was a flat plain. How could they defend the two great armies and attack the imperial palace? Is there a good plan to retreat the Snow Country's Divine World and True Martial World? Whoever can defeat the two worlds, I will appoint him as the commander of the 10 great armies of the ultimate martial world and grant him the title of Eternal King. As long as the empire does not fall, the throne will not be removed. Wu Jimu looked at the officials and said coldly. The officials all lowered their heads. The 10 great armies were defeated. Who could change the situation? Using the power of one world to resist the attack of two worlds. Wu Jimu was even more furious when he saw that no one dared to raise their heads. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. I have trained you for tens of thousands of years. If you can't even rely on a single one of you, what's the use of having you? Wu Jimu asked angrily. Your Majesty, don't get angry. You've injured your body. We had no choice but to attack them this time. The 10 top commanders don't have a pseudo-world item, while the Snow Nation's Divine World Swafong has 5 pseudo-world items. Now that they've obtained the 3-pronged pincer, they're unstoppable. Just relying on our physical bodies isn't realistic. Originally, we could have used numbers to suppress their army, but the true martial world interfered, saying that the Heaven Martial Legion sent troops to attack the true martial world. They originally wanted to take advantage of the chaos and fish in troubled waters. Now, if they want to win this round, they can only ask the Fourth Realm to participate in the battle. If they go in alone, they will be easily destroyed. At that time, not only can we protect the ultimate martial realm, we can also counterattack them and plunder their resources. At this time, a dignified old man walked up. He wore a long brocade robe and his body was wide and thick. He was very fortunate, but his life essence was severely damaged. With a single glance, one could tell that he was someone who lived in a high position and enjoyed life. He was the Prime Minister of the ultimate martial world, the uncle of the current emperor, Wu Jimu, Kai Tinjin. He lived in beauty all year round. Although he had a high position, he didn't have any true ability. He was constantly clever, and his body was fat. People called him a vegetable bun. Hearing Kai Tinjin's words, the ministers immediately agreed. The Prime Minister's wisdom is something we can't compare to. Wu Jimu lowered his head and pondered. The ministers didn't dare to say anything. Accompanying the emperor was like accompanying a tiger. Wu Jimu was currently at his most furious. One wrong word could lead to disaster. Your Majesty, our ultimate martial world has always been on good terms with the Peerless Realm. We just had a marriage alliance a few years ago. We can ask the Peerless Realm to come and help. Once we defeat the two armies, we can counterattack and obtain a large amount of resources. Heroes are born in troubled times, and a wise ruler is born. At that time, Your Majesty will rule the world and establish an unparalleled achievement that will be recorded in the annals of history," said Kai Tinjin excitedly. When Wu Jimu heard this, he immediately felt that it made sense. His anger gradually dissipated, and some excitement appeared in his eyes. It was as if he could see himself stepping on the imperial palace of the Snow Nation's god world. "I want to personally lead the army. The imperial palace will temporarily be managed by the eldest prince, Wu Jimu Ao Lai." Wu Jimu immediately stood up and said firmly. When the ministers and generals heard this, they immediately stopped him. "Your Majesty, the battlefield is too dangerous. The imperial palace also needs Your Majesty to oversee it." Kai Tinjin also tried to persuade him. "Your Majesty, you don't have to personally lead the army for now. This kind of trash only managed to fight their way here with a pseudo-world artifact. Once the Peerless Realm comes to help, we can counterattack at any time. It won't be too late for you to appear then." How could Wu Jimu not see that this group of people didn't dare to take responsibility? They were afraid that he would die on the battlefield. However, he was arrogant and had a strong desire to contribute. He wanted to personally lead the army to defeat the enemy and gain a good reputation. Therefore, he didn't listen to the ministers and Kai Tinjin's plan at all. He was determined to lead the army personally. When Kai Tinjin saw that he couldn't refute, he led Wu Jimu to personally lead the army to the Zhen Wuxia. It was fine to just suppress Shaolin, but he didn't dare to let him fight with the madmen of the left marshal's residence. Those 6 pseudo-world artifacts. Even if 10 armies surrounded them, they would have to pay a certain price to destroy them. If the emperor went there, the chances of him coming out alive would be too small. However, Wu Jimu was firm in his decision. He wanted to personally lead the army of the Snow Nation. He wanted to personally kill the commander of the left marshal's residence and the commander of the left marshal's residence, Zhuo Feng. Someone come and write a decree for the Peerless Realm's army to come and help. Wu Jimu was full of heroism. His blood was boiling. Sure enough, men were warlike in their bones, especially this kind of emperor. They all wanted to do things that others couldn't. The Peerless Realm already knew that the Zhen Wuxia and Snow Country's divine world were besieging the ultimate martial world, but they didn't do anything. Instead, they wanted the ultimate martial world to take the initiative to ask for help so that they could get more resources. The Peerless Realm and the ultimate martial world had a border, but they didn't have any intersection with the Zhen Wuxia and Snow Country's divine world. They could help the ultimate martial world at any time. Wu Jimu had given them countless resources and weapons, enough to form an army of 1,000,000. He had also given them a province's territory and sent it to the Supreme Realm. The Supreme Realm had sent 6 armies and thousands of supreme gods into the ultimate martial realm. A few days later, Wu Jimu personally led 3 armies. There were hundreds of warriors in the palace and more than 300 supreme gods. They all followed him back to the Great Dragon Mountain City. When Yi Qinghan received the news, he wasn't shocked but happy. He didn't want to win at all. He wanted to cause chaos in the 7 realms and lure the realm masters out to kill each other. Now that 4 realms were involved in the war, as long as the other 3 realms were dragged in, the crazy sex people could all withdraw and leave the mess to the realm masters, Ling Yan and Ji Gu. No matter how many casualties there were, it didn't matter to him. Once the 7 realms were in chaos, the Great Wasteland realm could rise. However, Ji Gu was a bit serious. With the Peerless Realm supporting the ultimate martial world, they blocked the army of nearly 10 million led by Shaolin. The ultimate martial world's power was enough to destroy this lone army. Even the pseudo-world weapon couldn't save them. Think of a way to let the divine martial world attack the Peerless Realm's rear. Let's make the 7 realms move. Only then will we have a chance to win. Yi Qinghan stared at Ji Gu and reminded him in a low voice. The wedding was in 2 days. Recently, he had been shopping. After the wedding, he would welcome the bride and send the guests off. Chapter 14:14. Wu Ji-mu personally led the troops. His mount was a unicorn that was about the size of an ordinary horse. It was as fast as lightning and could be compared to a heaven-controlling divine beast. The horn on its forehead could easily pierce through the defense of a supreme god expert when it reached adulthood. Killing a fake realm lord was not a legend. Furthermore, the unicorn he rode was passed down from his ancestors. It was already mature and was very powerful. Wu Ji-mu was in high spirits. He led several hundred supreme gods and controlled 1,000,000 imperial guards. They were all elites of the realm army. They killed their way to Yiqinghan's Dragon Mountain Prefecture like a hot knife through butter. The Supreme Realm sent 10 million troops. They split into 3 groups and replaced the 6 million troops of the ultimate martial realm. The 6 million troops retreated 3,000 li under the lead of their respective commanders. They went around the extreme Dao mountain range and rushed to the outskirts of the Dragon Mountain Prefecture to meet with Wu Ji-mu. 3,000 li was the place where Shaolinjun met up. However, these 3,000 li became a battlefield. The 11 million troops that wanted to break through Wu Ji-mu had a unicorn and several hundred supreme gods. These experts were all terrifying existences. Otherwise, they wouldn't be qualified to be the imperial family's consecrators. A few days later, Yiqinghan took control of the Dragon Mountain Prefecture. However, Wu Ji-mu had already met up with Sun Yang and the Supreme Martial Realm. The guards of various cities also began to gather here. They wanted to fight to the death with the Snow Realm army. Armies covered the sky and the earth, they gave off a majestic aura. The army formed a semicircle, surrounding the Dragon Mountain Prefecture tightly. Yiqinghan was overseeing the Yeli city of the Dragon Mountain Prefecture. This was the gateway to the Dragon Mountain Prefecture. Once one left Yeli city, one would be out of the Dragon Mountain Prefecture. Beyond that would be the hinterland, which was an endless plain. Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin stood on the left and right of Yiqinghan. They stared at the army outside the city. Their battle intent soared to the sky. It was as if even a small soldier wanted to fight to the death. According to reliable information, the emperor of the ultimate martial realm, Wu Ji-mu, is personally leading the troops. He is in the camp. Yiqinghan instructed as he tapped on the stone bricks and said in a low voice. Wu Ji-mu actually came. No wonder the army acted as if they had eaten some divine medicine. So they wanted to make a contribution. I'm afraid it won't be easy to fight with such morale. Ji Gu was a little worried. If they continued to fight like this, even if the Snow World army was wiped out, they still wouldn't be able to win. Zhu Wuxin looked at the countless tents gathered 30 li apart. He was even more worried that they would give up on the Dragon Mountain region and directly attack with fire or water. If they use fire or water to attack, we will be at a great disadvantage. Zhu Wuxian warned. Yiqinghan shook his head and said, there's no need to worry about water or fire attacks. I have the Inshur's pot, which can absorb everything in the world, including water and fire. What I'm most worried about now is that they'll only surround us and not attack us. They'll fight a war of attrition with us. After all, we're alone in the enemy's territory. If we don't achieve anything for a long time and waste a lot of resources, the imperial family behind us will definitely not be willing to fight a protracted war. Ji Ji's expression was very bad. He sighed, that group of old things really don't support war. I've repeatedly promised that we'll break into the imperial city within 10 years. Only then did they agree. Now, a year has passed. If they delay for another 3 to 5 years, even if our army gallops, we won't be able to reach the ultimate martial realm's imperial city. I don't think so. Since Wu Ji-mu has personally come to lead the army, he will definitely want to beat us back. Our army is limited in numbers and occupies a natural stronghold. We can only defend and not attack. Once we deplete 30% of their army, we can counterattack. Zhu Wuxin gave a different answer. What kind of person is this Wu Jimu? What's the world's evaluation of him? Yi Qinghan asked curiously. Eager for quick success and quick benefits. He's irritable. He's incomparably ruthless and suspicious. He's a very contradictory person. Ji Gu immediately said. Hearing Ji Ji's evaluation of Wu Jimu, Yi Qinghan heaved a sigh of relief. Close the city gates. Prepare the realm-opening crossbows and crossbows. We'll wait for the enemy to attack. Yi Qinghan's order resounded throughout Yeli City. Report. Commander, we've used up more than half of our crossbows. We're left with less than 10 million. The reinforcements from the rear have yet to arrive. They keep saying that they need more time to prepare. We can't do anything about it. The head of the Logistics Reserve Army rushed over and reported. Those damn things are causing trouble from the rear again. Emperor Shuayan must have teamed up with some clan elders to take revenge on us. Ji Gu waved his hand angrily and hit the city wall. Yi Qinghan did not react much. It was not as if he had never thought of such a situation before. He quickly said, "This is a hilly area. There are many mines here. Take back all the divine iron ores and find someone to mine them. We'll make our own crossbows. Can we make it in time?" Zhu Wuxin frowned and asked. Even a military factory would need several months to refine and prepare 1,000 crossbow bolts. This wasn't something that could be done in a day or two. Yi Qinghan smiled bitterly and said, "Even if we can't make it in time, we have to stall for time until I can make enough crossbows." To stall for time, the commander had to personally issue a challenge and request for a one-on-one battle to the death. When a commander issued a challenge in front of an army, he would either go into seclusion or fight one-on-one. This kind of situation was very common. Of course, a commander without absolute confidence would never dare to do this. The Wu Ji army rested for 3 days without any movement. Wu Jimu didn't seem to be in a hurry to attack. Instead, he gave the army enough time to rest and adjust their condition to the best. He was ready to break through the defense of the Dragon Mountain Prefecture in one go and completely destroy the Snow Realm army to show off his might. This battle, I want you to become a template that will be remembered forever in history. Just like the last battle of the Great Wasteland Domain, it will become a classic legend. Wu Jimu stared at the 10 commanders and said sternly, "If you can't do it, bring your heads to me." Sun Yang and the others looked at each other with a serious expression. They all knew that this Snow Kingdom army was very difficult to fight, especially the group of people from the left commander's mansion. They had even killed Revered Li. Once they joined hands, they could break through the army and kill the emperor as easy as pie. You guys should discuss how to fight now. How can we destroy the Snow Realm army in the Dragon Mountain Prefecture in the fastest and most domineering way? We will attack tomorrow morning. One night is enough for you guys to come up with a plan. Wu Jimu said firmly. The Wu Ji army was discussing how to attack in the camp. Yi Qinghan ordered a group of soldiers to speed up the acquisition and mining of divine iron mines. However, the air was filled with murderous aura. The sky was covered by dark clouds and heavy rain poured down. It seemed like it was going to drown the world. The low-lying land quickly turned into a lake. Some houses were submerged. Yi Qinghan built a refining room and used all the divine iron ores he found to refine them into crossbow bolts. However, there were simply too few materials. He only managed to refine 10,000 bolts in one night, which was not even enough for one wave of attacks. The next morning, Wu Jimu personally stood on the battle drum platform and pretended to be dignified as he shouted, "The enemy is invading." Warriors of the Wu Ji army, after today's battle, those who perform meritorious deeds will be rewarded with a top-grade woman and a certain amount of pills and resources. It will be enough for you to advance by 1 level. I will be with you. Chapter 14-15. With Wu Jimu's shout, the army's morale reached its peak. For resources, for high-quality women, for promotion, for future enjoyment, they wanted to fight the Snow World Army to the death. Ji Ge squinted his eyes at Wu Jimu and exchanged a glance with Zhu Wuxin. He didn't panic, instead, he was pleasantly surprised. How confident is he that he dares to expose his position? Ji Ge's eyes flashed coldly. To catch bandits, first catch their leader. To scold, first curse their mother. Let's get rid of Wu Jimu and throw the army into chaos, Zhu Wuxin said firmly. Wu Jimu had at least 200 supreme gods around him, and none of them were lower than a mid-level supreme god. They were all gifted, and their defense was extremely tight. Assassinating Wu Jimu was as difficult as ascending the heavens, but it wasn't impossible. Even if the losses were heavy, the effect would be great in the future. At least, it could reduce the loss of 1 million soldiers. Let's find Mr. Zhua and discuss this. No matter how many crossbows there are, it's not as good as killing Wu Jimu. Ji Ge said. Soon, someone rushed to the refining room. Yi Qinghan's eyes were a bit red. He was very tired, but knowing that Wu Jimu's position had been exposed, he was very excited. Shua! Yi Qinghan's figure flashed and appeared on the city wall. Seeing Wu Jimu raise the morale, he first activated the giant bow. Hiss hiss hiss. The giant bow was fully pulled, and the bowstring cut through time and space. The arrow formed by the power of the world shot out cold light and lightning. It was extremely terrifying, as if it was going to destroy everything. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan didn't even aim, and his godly power poured out in an instant. He aimed at Wu Jimu's general position and shot. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The arrow drew out a flame dragon and was as fast as lightning. The 30-li distance was covered in the blink of an eye, and it didn't give anyone time to react. The experts of the ultimate martial world army were shocked, and they all rushed toward Wu Jimu. The group of experts formed a human wall, and their supreme godly power burst out. Just as a part of the wall was formed, the arrow pierced through the air barrier. Hiss hiss hiss. The unicorn neighed, and a golden light shot out of its horn towards the arrow. Boom! Whoosh! The arrow shattered the void, and the golden light shot out by the unicorn was destroyed. It was less than 10 meters in front of the unicorn. Boom! The arrow stirred up a shockwave that soared into the galaxy and swept across thousands of miles. This arrow had drained all of Yi Qinghan's god power. With the help of the ice element and snow element god power, it was definitely comparable to the combined attack of hundreds of peak supreme gods. It was as destructive as the peak attack of a junior pseudo-sector lord, not to mention that it was supported by Berserk and the Great Desolation godly pearl. Thus, the power of this attack was comparable to that of a mid-level pseudo-sector lord. Wu Jimu's eyes were filled with fear. Even though the unicorn was resisting with all its might, there was still a wave of power that broke through its defenses and sent it flying. Poof! Wu Jimu wasn't weak, but compared to Yi Qinghan's peak attack, the difference was too great. The shockwave made his blood boil, and he coughed up blood. His body was sent flying far away like a kite with a broken string. Whoosh! More than 10 men of sacrifice used their bodies to block the aftershocks. Some of them flew towards the Wu Jimu, blocking some of the aftershocks for him. Waves of air blasted out in all directions, and the people in front of the martial extreme screen exploded one after another. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere, dyeing half the sky red. It was extremely terrifying. Boom! After Yi Qinghan released this attack, he directly fell down and didn't have the power to release a second attack. Jiang Jingtian took over and pierced the world with a spear that destroyed space and time. He became one with the spear and directly blasted into the Wu Jimu 30 miles away. The power of the world tore through everything. Boom! The unicorn roared and rushed into the sky, blocking Jiang Jingtian halfway. Its long horn collided with the world-piercing spear, and a wave of air blasted out from the sky. It was like the aftermath of a star exploding, and flames soared into the sky. Jiang Jingtian was blocked, but Gu Qingyu rushed out again, and his sword pierced through the clouds. Whoosh! Xiaoye held the thunder god's hammer and turned into a thunder god and lightning goddess. Lightning covered the sky and covered the earth. Defend! Explode the sky and explode the earth. Boom! The army of millions gathered together, and their morale, aura, and divine power formed a huge sphere of defense. Divine light flowed, and treasure energy soared into the sky. Boom! Gu Qingyu was immediately sent flying. Xiaoye's lightning struck the treasure light barrier, but it didn't cause any ripples. Boom! Gu Qingyu and Xiaoye were sent flying, and so was Jiang Jingtian, who fell outside the city wall. Wu Jimu was the unluckiest. His clothes were ragged, and he coughed up blood. His internal organs were almost crushed by Yi Qinghan's arrow, and he was heavily injured. The army was in chaos, and the camp was a mess. The commanders of the 10 armies quickly mobilized their troops to defend, and the consecrators of the Jiwu dynasty rushed toward Wu Jimu like crazy. The sky was filled with dust, and it was impossible to tell who was injured and who was Wu Jimu. Some people didn't understand the situation and directly stepped on Wu Jimu's body. Ah! Wu Jimu screamed, and he was so angry that he couldn't even scream. His eyes were red, and he wanted to curse, but he couldn't find the right words to describe his feelings. After being stepped on hundreds of times, Wu Jimu couldn't struggle, and he was on the verge of death. He was only discovered when his life beast, the unicorn, rushed in front of him, and they carried him onto a stretcher. At this moment, his nose was crooked from anger. Yi Qinghan was supported to sit on a chair. He swallowed a large amount of divine pellets, and his body emitted 7-colored radiance, quickly recovering his divine power. Gu Qingyu and the others returned without any success, and their faces were red. They were greatly shaken by the divine power of the army, and their blood was surging, but they managed to suppress it. Sun Yang and the others were burning with anger. In order to not let Wu Jimu wake up, they directly led the 10 armies to attack Yili city. There were armies in all directions, and the arrows were shot, covering the sky. The arrow rain roared and crashed into the defensive formation, and the arrows were all bent. Millions of soldiers defended, and they didn't attack, only defending to stall for time. This continued for 3 days, and they still couldn't break through the defense. The Snow Border Army, under the leadership of Zhi Gu and Zhu Wuxin, occasionally shot arrows, and killed tens of thousands of enemies. The ultimate martial world's army was furious, but the enemy had occupied the high ground, and the arrows were shot, and the divine power enchantment enveloped the surrounding 100,000 li. It was impossible to break through their defense, and they could only delay the attack. Both armies were extremely tired, and Sun Yang and the others had no choice but to stop the attack. But just as they retreated, the Snow Border Army shot out thousands of arrows, and a rain of arrows poured down. In an instant, millions of arrows were shot out, and 1/10 of the resources were consumed. The ultimate martial world's army lost 100,000 men, and at least 200,000 were heavily injured. Until the 5th day, Yi Qinghan finally filled up his divine power. He looked at the crossbow arrows below the city, but they were all bent, and became inferior arrows, flickering with light. Solo challenge: collect all the broken arrows around, and clean up the battlefield. Yi Qinghan said solemnly. Chapter 14-16. Both armies were filled with hatred and anger. In the end, Sun Yang, Jian Wuzun, and the others used water and fire attacks, but they were sucked away by Yi Qinghan's Inshir's pot. They could not do much, so they had to give up. Wu Jimu was the unluckiest. He had just led the army and was almost killed. He was seriously injured and was recuperating. When he heard the situation, he was so angry that he spat out blood. "I'll give you, cough cough, 3 months, to annihilate this army. No matter the cost. Wu Jimu roared. The 10 armies received a death order. They only had 3 months. It was difficult. The 10 armies split into 2. One went from the right flank and prepared to attack from the rear, while the other went from the front. They had been attacking day and night for a few days. Not only had they not achieved anything, but they had also left behind hundreds of thousands of corpses. In Yeli City, Yi Qinghan was not happy. Instead, he was very annoyed. A batch of resources had come from the rear, and they were all of inferior quality. Even the crossbow bolts, which were important offensive resources, were of inferior quality. They would turn into powder with a light shake. They were no different from rotten wood. These bastards. Ji Gu was furious. Without resources, even if he had great abilities, he could not turn the situation around. We can't use these resources. Once we use them, they will know that we have no support from the rear. They will definitely exhaust us to death, Yi Qinghan reminded in a low voice. What should we do now? Should we retreat now? We are about to attack the center. If we retreat now, won't we have lost so many soldiers for nothing? Ji Gu said angrily. Yi Qinghan remained silent for a long time. Even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. The resources of Dragon Mountain Prefecture had all been taken away by the army led by Sun Yang and the others, especially the Divine Iron Mine. Even the dregs had been taken away, leaving nothing behind for them. Since the rear was not providing them with any resources, it would be very difficult for them to attack. Their plan had been unintentionally ruined by those selfish bastards at the rear. Start the individual challenge, after a long time, Yi Qinghan said faintly. Deep in his heart, he had already decided to let the people of Guangzhou retreat and create chaos in the 7 realms. He would leave the mess to Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin. Starting from Celestial Venerable Nangong, more than 30 members of the insane sect went out of the city to challenge the other party's captains one by one. Almost all of them challenged the other party's captains in a lose-lose manner. They killed one of the captains or consecrators of the other party and sustained heavy injuries themselves. Their life force was almost completely depleted. In the end, Yi Qinghan personally collected their corpses. 3 days later, Wu Jiang and the others were all killed in battle, which caused the anger of the Snow Realm army. Yi Kun wanted to take the opportunity to join the battle, but Yi Qinghan did not allow him to do so. He only allowed him to watch. This guy was an uncontrollable factor. Yi Qinghan did not trust him at all. He only wanted him to see how difficult life was. However, Yi Kun did not understand. On the surface, he was respectful to Yi Qinghan, but deep down, he was resentful. The ultimate martial empire was very puzzled. They did not understand why the left martial residence was so desperate. In just a few days, more than half of their people had died. Only a few captains with pseudo-world weapons were still alive. Something is wrong. Sovereign Tianwu frowned and said. Yes, the elites of the left martial residence seem to be seeking death. It's simply inexplicable. Long Ziyue was somewhat confused. At first, he was excited when he saw the consecrators kill the elites of the left martial residence, but now, there was only deep suspicion. Over the past 3 days, the Jiwu dynasty's consecrators and captains had lost more than 40 people, while the crazy sect's 20 people were severely injured and almost died. They quietly retreated and returned to the Inshur's pot to cultivate in peace. A large number of divine life pills were used on them. Even the remaining resources of the army were taken away by Yi Qinghan. Only Xiao Yu, Gu Qingyu, Jiang Jingtian, Shi Gu, and Li Feng were left behind to follow Yi Qinghan. The people of the left martial residence were almost completely annihilated, which stimulated the Snow Border Army's will to die. If the left martial residence's captains could die in battle, why couldn't they? Ji Gu was very pained. He did not want to continue fighting alone like this. The casualties were too heavy. If an ordinary captain died, then so be it. But this was the elite of the left martial residence. They could be of great help at the crucial moment. Zhu Wuxin also wanted to stop the challenge, but Yi Qinghan had already made up his mind. He did not want the people of the insane sect to take any more risks. He personally controlled the front line and sent Shirgu to challenge. Shirgu naturally challenged the captains of the 10 armies. His goal was the same as Gu Qingyu and the others. These 5 people continuously challenged for about 10 days. They were covered in wounds, but the more they fought, the braver they became. The captains of the ultimate martial realm naturally wanted to suppress these 5 people and seize the pseudo-world weapons. They fought until the heavens fell and the earth cracked. It made people's blood boil. The fighting spirit of the 2 armies was aroused. They all beat the drums and shouted, hoping for their side to win. In the end, the 5 people paid the price of dying the next day to kill Sun Yang and the captains of the other 4 armies. However, they managed to keep the pseudo-world weapons. Both sides suffered heavy losses, but they did not know that the people of the insane sect had hidden and escaped. Although they were heavily injured, they did not die. Yi Qinghan still had a life-saving pill that he obtained from the heavens. He crushed it into powder and distributed it to these people. The efficacy of the pill had weakened a lot, but it was still enough to protect their lives. After the mission was completed, Yi Qinghan finally let out a sigh of relief. The rest was up to him. But now was not the time because the 7 realms were not in chaos yet. I will assassinate Wu Jimu. You guys try to take advantage of the chaos to crush the ultimate martial realm's army. As long as Wu Jimu is dead, the army will be crushed. The ultimate martial realm will be a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. I do not believe that the 6 beast realms and the void realm will not participate in the fight for resources. Yi Qinghan said firmly. What? This is too dangerous. There must be many experts around Wu Jimu. We will not be able to return. Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin were against Yi Qinghan going to the enemy's hinterland to assassinate Wu Jimu. They did not know if he could succeed. Even if he succeeded, Yi Qinghan would not be able to come back. Yi Qinghan was indifferent. This time, he did not plan to return alive. After all, he had transferred his origin and life's comprehension to his clone in the Great Wasteland realm. Now, he was the clone, and the one in the Great Wasteland realm was his real body. Yi Qinghan stood up and reminded in a deep voice, if Wu Jimu is not dead, the enemy will not be in chaos. We do not have enough resources, and the enemy's army will come to our aid from the rear. We will definitely lose. It is enough to exchange the lives of millions of soldiers with the destruction of my left martial residence. Yi Qinghan's words were impassioned and inspiring. Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin were also convinced. This kind of fearless sacrifice was something they could not do. The Snow Realm army's Kiliarchs were preparing for battle, waiting for the order to charge at any time. During the day, Yi Qinghan used the last bit of preheating to refine all the useless arrows shot from the ultimate martial realm. He added millions of crossbow arrows, giving the Snow Realm army a glimmer of hope. After resting for a while, Yi Qinghan quietly disappeared from Yeli City. He handed his Inshir's pot to Yan Yunbei who was hiding in the mountains and said in a deep voice, "Bring them back to the Great Wasteland realm and hand them over to my real body. Without my orders, they are not allowed to leave the Great Wasteland realm." Yan Yunbei took the Inshir's pot and also Yi Kuan. Yi Qinghan took advantage of the night to approach the ultimate martial realm's camp. Chapter 14-17. Yi Qinghan approached the military camp. It was a dark and windy night, but he seemed to have forgotten about the spiritual pets in his body. The other spiritual pets were still fine, as they had been automatically transferred to the original body due to the bloodline transfer. However, the divine bird was still with Yi Qinghan. "Master, don't be rash. I can't fly to the great wasteland domain alone. The divine bird knelt on the ground and tugged at Yi Qinghan's trousers, crying. Yi Qinghan waved his hand to undo the life contract between him and the divine bird. He said calmly, follow Zhu Wuxin for now. He will ensure your safety. Just don't run around. This is a time of war. If you run around, don't blame me if you die. The divine bird had a pitiful look on its face as it said in despair, I'm a troublemaker. How can that half-baked Zhu Wuxin protect me? Only the great master can protect me. Smack! Yi Qinghan lifted his foot and kicked the divine bird away. The divine bird turned into a stream of light and rushed into Yeli City. Yi Qinghan looked at the iron barrel-like defense. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to enter the depths and find the Wuji screen. Burrow! Whoosh! Yi Qinghan went about 30 meters underground. Further down was the hard rock layer. Further up, the army on the ground could sense it. This was a precise depth. He sped forward and searched for a long time with the help of the earth elements and the power of the earth. He found an empty space and rushed up from the depths without disturbing any elements. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan's silhouette moved, and the armor of an ordinary soldier of the Wuji army appeared on his body. This was something that he had left behind for the previous attack. He had already decided on today's attack, and everything had been prepared. Tat tat tat. Yi Qinghan swaggered toward the distant camp. Who is it? It's me. I'm taking a piss, Yi Qinghan said in a low voice. Damn, can't you run further away? An impatient reprimand came from afar. Yi Qinghan chuckled. It could be said that he had concealed his identity. It was not that the ultimate martial realm's army had underestimated their enemy, but that they had never thought that someone would sneak into their camp at this time. After gaining a firm foothold, Yi Qinghan quietly snuck into the tent. Even the weakest person who could sleep in such a high-class tent was a centurion. The centurion was merely a peak giant god, and before he could even wake up, Yi Qinghan had already snapped his neck. His soul was directly invaded, and all his memories were devoured, becoming a part of him. Through the centurions, he was able to locate the Kiliarch's tent. Just like before, he was able to kill the Chiliarch at lightning speed and locate the location of the Major's commander. Major generals were early paramount gods, and had outstanding military exploits, making them difficult to assassinate. Of course, that was only relative. Yi Qinghan put on his colonel's uniform and headed straight for the general's tent. The tent was surrounded by soldiers, and quite a few centurions and Kiliarchs had their own tents nearby. Even the slightest disturbance would alert them. Yi Qinghan gazed at Major Lei Ting's tent from afar. As long as I can kill Lei Ting and use his name to go to the ultimate martial screen's tent, things will be much easier. Clatter clatter clatter, Yi Qinghan quickly approached Lei Ting's tent, only to be stopped by soldiers. He waved his hand and produced his Chiliarch identity medallion, and the soldiers quickly retreated until they were outside the tent. He bowed and said, Chiliarch Shang Minjun of the 4th Battalion has come to pay his respects to you, milord. He has important information to report. Enter. A deep voice rang out from within the tent. Yi Qinghan put on Shang Minjun's human skin mask and stepped into the tent. The Major General's tent was just like the General's residence, and it had everything. An old man opened his eyes, which were filled with a sharp light. He stared at Yi Qinghan and said coldly, What information do you have to report in the middle of the night? Milord, Yi Qinghan said in a hushed voice, I've discovered a mountain passageway that can be used to attack Yeri City. This lowly one doesn't dare claim credit for himself, so I've come to report. What? Lei Ting's eyes lit up as he rose to his feet and clasped Yi Qinghan's shoulder. Where is it? If there really is such a passageway, you'll be the deputy commander. If I become the commander-in-chief, you'll be a major general. A few days ago, the commander-in-chief of the ultimate martial screen had died. Even Sun Yang had died. Everyone was eyeing the position of commander-in-chief, but without any military merit, it was useless. It was no wonder Lei Ting was so excited. "Thank you, my lord, for your help. During the day, the commander-in-chief is fighting. I've led a small team through the mountains and accidentally discovered a passageway that can allow 3 to 5 people to walk side by side. It leads straight to Yeri City. That passageway is..." Shua. Puchi. Yi Qinghan's hand turned into a blade and sealed Lei Ting's throat. He forcefully cut through his defenses and covered his mouth. The sector lord's soul was destroyed easily. Lei Ting's body twitched for a moment before he died. A cold smile appeared on Yi Qinghan's lips. He tore off Shang Minjun's face and stuck Shang Minjun's face onto his own. Yi Qinghan's body twisted and quickly became short and thin. He changed out of his battle robe and used his mind to control Lei Ting's body. He quickly left the tent and headed straight for the area where the martial extreme screen was. Ultimate martial screen was in the center. Around him were the supreme consecrators and the commander-in-chief of the other armies. The unicorn was also waiting outside the relay station. After so many days, Ultimate Martial Screen's injuries were finally getting better. After knowing that the 5 commander-in-chief and close to 100 Kiliarchs and majors had been exchanged for the elites of the left martial residence, he didn't feel any regret. Well done. These sacrificed Kiliarchs and majors, as well as the 5 commander-in-chief, will all be buried. Their status will be raised by 1 level. Their descendants will be conferred the title of Marquis and Marquis. Their rewards will be based on the rank of the officer. Ultimate Martial Screen was extremely excited. He gave out the rewards in front of everyone and quickly passed the order to the various divisions of the army. Ultimate Martial Screen and the other 4 commander-in-chief felt sad. 5 commander-in-chief died in exchange for the lives of the left martial residents. It wasn't worth it. However, they didn't know that none of the people from the left martial residence had died. They were only heavily injured and had been given god pills by the sector lord. When they returned to the great wasteland domain, Yi Qinghan's main body would naturally have a way to save them. In the middle of the night, in Ultimate Martial Screen's tent, many commander-in-chief and majors were preparing to leave. At this moment, Yi Qinghan impersonated the major of the proper martial army, Lei Ting, and reported that the commander-in-chief of the proper martial army had died in battle. He was now qualified to face Ultimate Martial Screen directly. Ultimate Martial Screen was in a good mood and said with great interest, "Call him in. I want to see if he has any important information that can change the situation of the battle." Yi Qinghan transformed into the short and thin Lei Ting. He was very majestic as he quickly stepped into the tent. Seeing that most of the high-ranking officers were present, the corners of his mouth curled up. He knelt down on one knee and bowed, "I just received a report from my subordinates. During the day, they found a path that leads directly to Yeli City. They were foolish and wanted me to take credit for it. They only informed me now. Your Majesty, please punish me." Ultimate Martial Screen was excited, but Ultimate Martial Screen and the others frowned. They all stared at Yi Qinghan. Chapter 14:18. Naturally, the Sky Martial Saint did not want to believe this information. Firstly, he did not want such a great merit to fall into the hands of a mere captain. Secondly, if there really was a passage, why didn't the natives discover it? Yi Qinghan glanced at the crowd and found that the commanders were all very defensive. It would be very difficult to kill Wu Jimu at this moment, and it would not cause a lot of losses. Therefore, he had to make them lower their guard and self-destruct to wipe out the upper echelons of the Ultimate Martial Realm army. Yi Qinghan's heart is very ruthless and vicious. Only when all the higher-ups here die will the Snow World army be able to break through the 5 million strong army like a hot knife through butter. After killing them, the Non-Wei World and 6 Beast World will join the battle and fight for resources. Only then would the 7 realms be in chaos. The plan was perfect, the 7 realms were in chaos, the people of the crazy sect had all retreated, and he had used the method of self-detonation to establish his prestige, making the Snow Realm army respect him. At that time, Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin would not oppose him. At that time, the Snow Realm army would betray the Realm Lord and follow him, making the real plan much easier to execute. Where is the passage? If it is true, you are the new commander of the proper martial army. Wu Jimu was not stupid, he stared at Yi Qinghan and asked. Yi Qinghan half knelt on the ground and pretended to be excited. I have already gone to investigate personally. My subordinates did not lie, the passage is in the extreme Dao mountain range. As long as an army enters the extreme Dao mountain range from the north and crosses the mountain range, there is a cliff. On the other side of the cliff is Yeli City. Because of the poisonous miasma on the cliff, no one can pass through it. And because of this, Yeli City has no defenses. The Sky Marshal Saint and Wu Jimu stared at Yi Qinghan and signaled for him to continue. With an excited smile, Yi Qinghan continued, in fact, there's an iron chain bridge about 30 meters below the cliff. It's about 30 meters wide. The other side of the bridge leads directly to the military warehouse of Yeri City, but it's been blocked by rocks. According to my investigation, it's about 10 meters thick. Your Majesty, your unicorn can break it with one blow. Once the passage is opened, it'll be enough for the army to launch a sneak attack on Yeri City. Supreme Sky Marshal Emperor and Long Ziyue looked at each other. There was actually such a passage hidden in Yeli City. As the commander of the Heavenly Martial Army, he did not know about it. As expected, Wu Jimu coldly glanced at Sovereign Martial Emperor and coldly said, Beloved Martial Emperor, is beloved Thunderbolt speaking the truth? I'll give you 2 hours to find the Aborigines and let me know the general situation on the other side of the cliff and how different it is from what Lei Ting said. Sweat appeared on Sovereign Tianwu's forehead. He coldly glanced at Lei Ting and snorted, Men, go and find the patriarch of the Gu family of Yeli City. Tell him to come and greet His Majesty as soon as possible. Yes. A chilly arch quickly left the tent. Wu Jimu's face was filled with joy. If what Lei Ting said was true, then Yeli City would fall on its own. A great achievement was right in front of him. A legendary battle would be born in his hands. Wu Jimu looked at Yi Qinghan in front of him and nodded in satisfaction, Beloved Thunderbolt, please take a seat. Thank you, Your Majesty. This general will kneel here. When Your Majesty confirms the information, it won't be too late for this general to take a seat. Yi Qinghan said confidently. Wu Jimu laughed loudly. The more he looked, the more satisfied he was. He couldn't help but ask, Beloved Thunderbolt, do you have any wishes? Your Majesty, this general is willing to personally lead troops into Yeli City tomorrow and capture that traitor's Wafeng alive. I will avenge the commander and share Your Majesty's burden. Yi Qinghan said resolutely. Ha 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 ha. Wu Jimu laughed loudly. He couldn't wait to make Lei Ting the commander of the proper martial army right now. The corner of Yi Qinghan's mouth twitched. If it wasn't for the fact that the plan had already been set, he would have wanted to become the commander of the proper martial army and launch a counterattack against the Snow Realm army, tearing the 7 realms apart. Unfortunately, Wu Jimu had to die, and it had to be tonight. Inside the tent, everyone was waiting anxiously. They hoped that Lei Ting's words were true so that they could break into Yeli City. However, they also didn't want it to be true because they didn't want Lei Ting to become the commander of the proper martial army. Some captains looked at Lei Ting with jealousy. They only hated that they didn't get such important information. Their vigilance slowly relaxed. Most of their attention was focused on whether the information was accurate or not. Even Sovereign Tianwu's guard was relaxed. Boom boom boom. Yi Qinghan's blood was flowing faster. Wu Jimu and the others thought that Yi Qinghan was excited. After all, he had become the commander. If it was anyone else, they would have been so excited that they couldn't control themselves. However, Yi Qinghan was already preparing to self-destruct. His divine power was quickly circulating. He naturally knew the power system of the ultimate martial realm, so no one suspected anything. Time passed. Sovereign Tianwu summoned the head of the Gu family in Yeli City. After receiving his confirmation, everyone relaxed. Wu Jimu took the lead in cheering. It was as if they had already broken into Yeli City. Boom boom boom. Yi Qinghan's blood was flowing out of control. Wu Jimu laughed loudly, Lei Ting, don't get excited. The commander's seal of the proper martial army is yours. Ha 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 ha, thank you, your majesty. Yi Qinghan laughed wildly. His expression was ferocious. His aura suddenly increased by more than 1,000 times. Be careful. Sovereign Tianwu was shocked. However, it was too late to stop Yi Qinghan. Who would have thought that Lei Ting, who had just obtained the commander's seal, would self-destruct? Boom! Hua! A giant mushroom cloud rose into the sky. The night was as bright as day. Shockwaves swept out like a star exploding. The destructive power was unstoppable, tearing everything apart. Bang! Boom! Many captains couldn't withstand Yi Qinghan's self-destruction. Their bodies were shattered. Their vigorous blood was completely burned by the flames. Even their souls were shattered into nothingness. Sovereign Tianwu threw himself at Wu Jimu. However, both of their bodies were swept into the sky by the shockwaves of the self-destruction. The terrifying power of the world tore through the sky. Wu Jimu's body was shattered. However, his body emitted a power of the world that blocked Yi Qinghan's self-destruction with great difficulty. Pseudo-world artifact. Wu Jimu had a pseudo-world artifact on him that automatically protected him. Because Yi Qinghan's self-destruction was enough to destroy Wu Jimu, the pseudo-world artifact was activated. Its light shone for 1,000 miles. Sovereign Tianwu profited from this disaster and managed to escape with his life. However, the others weren't so lucky. Aside from a unicorn outside the tent that was too strong, everyone inside the tent was blown to death. The consecrators outside were also blown away. Their bodies were half crippled. It was already not bad for them to be able to use even 10% of their strength. A giant mushroom cloud rose in the center of the ultimate martial realm's army. It was incomparably tragic. Everyone within a radius of 1,000,000 miles could clearly feel the self-destruction of a pinnacle expert. Furthermore, there were more than 10 godheads, ice and snow-type spiritual space exploding at the same time. This was the proof of how great the destructive power was. The upper echelons of the army in the center suffered heavy losses. About 80% of them had fallen. Ji Gu and Zhu Wuxin looked from afar. Their eyes were filled with shock. They couldn't understand why Yi Qinghan would do such a thing. Was it really to destroy the ultimate martial realm? You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.